Welcome to Safe on Deck. For episode 9, I sat down with Commander John Reutter. John graduated from Auburn University in May of 2001 and was commissioned as an ensign in the U.S. Navy. He earned his Wings of Gold in July of 2004 and proceeded to Naval Air Station Jacksonville to learn to fly the P-3C Orion maritime patrol aircraft. His first operational assignment was with VP-45, the Pelicans, where he qualified as a patrol plane commander, functional check flight pilot, and mission commander. He deployed to Okinawa, Japan, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq, El Salvador, Sicily, and Djibouti in support of the 5th Fleet, 7th Fleet, U.S. Southern Command, and U.S. Africa Command. In 2008, John checked into the 32nd Flying Training Squadron at Vance Air Force Base in Oklahoma, where he served as an advanced flight instructor in the T-1A Jayhawk. In December of 2011, John affiliated with the Navy Reserve and was selected to be an instructor pilot at Training Squadron 10 aboard Naval Air Station Pensacola. On March 25th of this year, Commander Reutter passed command of the VT-10 Squadron Augment Unit and retired from the U.S. Navy with over 4,000 hours in a variety of military aircraft. John's flown professionally, both domestically and overseas, and he currently flies the Airbus A320 for a major U.S. airline. Thanks again for taking the time to listen. In the future, I plan to continue to share similar interviews with both current and retired military aviators. If you have a question or suggestion for a future interview, please leave it as a comment below. Safe on Deck, Episode 9, with Commander John Reutter. Enjoy. John, where were you born?
I was born in Leesville, Louisiana.
Leesville? Okay, so where in the state? I'm not familiar with the town.
Yeah, that's great. Great question. So my dad was a career Army guy, so I was born in Fort Polk.
Fort Polk? Okay, I think I know where that is.
Yep.
Any distinct memories of home or?
Not that young.
Not that young?
We were there for a couple years and then moved to Korea.
Wow.
When I was 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, you probably definitely don't remember Louisiana then. What's your first distinct memory of aviation, though? I get a feeling that probably started pretty early.
Yeah. My dad started off as a medic in the Army, and then he went through OCS and went to flight school and became a medevac pilot. So he flew Hueys and Blackhawks.
Nice.
And my first recollection of aviation was seeing him flying in a Black Hawk. And it was one of those events at the parade field where, all the families come out, and I could see the 60 about 200 meters away, and they get in the helicopter and fire it up and come over and land it in front of us and shut down, and then everybody gets to sit in the helicopter and all that. But I remember seeing that, and that was really what started it for me, I think.
Wow, that's really cool. You remember that so distinctly, too.
Yeah, sure do.
Well, you mentioned the Army, and obviously your dad is an Army aviator. Why the Navy? I'm guessing maybe was there a little bit of pull to be an Army aviator from him, or?
Yeah, no, actually, there wasn't.
Okay, totally fair.
So, it was funny. My dad, he said, you don't really have to go into the military. And he said, but if you do, you probably shouldn't go Army.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's fair. Yeah.
Sorry, Dad.
Totally fair.
But, so I picked the Navy just because I knew they had a little bit of everything. As far as, aviation, I wasn't exactly sure if being a pilot was what I wanted to do. So in hindsight, the Air Force has a little bit of everything, too. So does the Marine Corps, so does the Army, to be honest with you. So it was just something different.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
I know a lot of folks that are members of military families, a lot of them moving around when they're young kind of turns them off to the idea of military service. So it's interesting. It sounds like obviously it did not for you. You kind of knew the game, I guess, a little bit, even if it was the Navy versus the Army.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I got accustomed to moving around and meeting new people.
Okay.
And having new experiences. So for me, that wasn't really a detractor.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
First memory of the Black Hawk, we got that locked and loaded. Were you OCS? Were you Naval Academy? ROTC?
I was ROTC.
ROTC. Okay, where at?
Sure was. I went to Auburn University.
I have your resume, so I knew that.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Yes, Auburn. My old roommate in primary, he yelled War Eagle all the time. So tell me about Auburn. Was it a good experience?
Auburn was a great experience.
Okay. What'd you study?
I loved it. Well, I was an engineering major for about 2 quarters and decided that wasn't for me. So I ended up transitioning to liberal arts.
Okay.
And went into French studies.
French? So, I've never talked to someone who has been in French studies. What does that even entail? I don't even know. Can you speak French?
I could if I went back. If I immersed for about 2 weeks, I'd probably be back there. But the first thing to go is vocabulary. So that's pretty weak, I think.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
ROTC at Auburn, or?
I did.
Okay.
Yes. So I applied for a Navy scholarship and didn't pick it up. And so I went ahead and did what we call the college program. So you go into ROTC anyway. And I think after my first or second quarter, we were on the quarter system then, I ended up picking up a scholarship that paid for the last 3 years of school.
Okay.
So.
Gotcha. So one thing, I was an OCS guy, so I don't really have a lot of data points on this, but the reason I ask, for me, you want to be an aviator, I literally had 3 choices, and I put pilot, pilot, pilot. So if I got into OCS, I was going there as a naval aviator.
Brilliant. How
does it work through ROTC? Because it's a little bit more competitive, right? You're competing against your peers?
It is, yes. And honestly, I don't know if I had any other choice besides pilot either. So I just assumed everything would work out.
And it sounds like it did?
Surprisingly, it did, yes.
Do you remember when in the process? Was it year 3, probably like junior year, senior year? When do you find out where you're going next as your Navy career?
I want to say it's right before you start your senior year. Or in the beginning of your senior year. And I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that.
No, that's fine.
It wasn't until I did. Yeah, so between years of school, you do Midshipman Cruises, right? And so I think it's between your junior and senior year. Let me think about this.
There's a couple, right? Couple cruises.
Yeah, you do 2 of them. Yeah. So one's your second class cruise and one's your first class cruise.
Okay.
Or that's the way it was back when I was there.
Absolutely.
So I think second class is after your freshman year and first class is after your sophomore year. Man.
It's been a couple years, I'm guessing.
So. Yeah. So maybe it's the summer at the end of your junior year, maybe going into your senior year,
Okay.
Yeah.
At that point, you're committed. You've taken the money. Like, you're going to be a naval officer of some flavor.
Yeah, I think after your first year, you're committed.
Okay.
So if you, as a matter of fact, I think there were people, at least one person I can think of who failed out of school, but that individual ended up having to enlist and serve time on the boat.
Oh,
That's
gosh.
right.
Yeah.
Or the ship.
When you've taken, well, it's fine. I call it the same. When you've taken the money, you're serving one way or the other at that point.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
So
you're going to be a pilot. Did you have any prior flight time? Did you get to fly at Auburn? I know they have a flying program there.
Yeah, they did. So it got shut down for a while, I think, after I left, and then it started back up.
Okay.
But I had friends that were doing aviation management, and so you would go out to the airfield and get some time in a Cessna.
Okay.
And one of my instructors, my ROTC instructors, said, "Hey, you don't need to do that. You'll pick up bad habits, and then it'll work against you when you get to flight school, right?"
Okay.
Well, I was so green back then that it took me, I'd say half a year, maybe a year, to realize that he wasn't even a pilot. He was an F-14 Rio.
Maybe his advice was not that great.
I was like, that jerk. Yeah, man, stay in your lane, bro.
Yeah.
So, in retrospect, maybe I would have done that. It definitely would have helped, because when I went to flight school, IFS, Introductory Flight Screening, was a beta program. So I didn't even do that. I just went straight to API. And then my first time actually flying a plane was in the T-34 when I was in primary.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot to learn.
I can imagine. So. That's incredible. Okay. Yeah, and I would try to give that advice to anyone now. I'm not saying necessarily you have to get your license if anything, in retrospect, I think looking back, an instrument ticket would have made the difference.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. That smoked me, just like everybody else that goes through.
Because there's folks, and you're absolutely right. I remember in my primary squadron at VT6 at Whiting, there's one guy that DOR'd, and I'm not going to mention his name mostly because I can't remember it, but there was a guy that DOR'd, drop on request. He quit prior to even finishing primary, and I remember he mentioned it's too hard to unlearn and do it differently. And I know I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit too, because I thought, hey man, you're going to be learning the Navy way for a long time. I guess if you can't master it now, maybe you should kind of leave. But I had my private pilot's license. Not a lot of flight time, but I remember thinking it was a really great foundation. You know what the radio calls sound like. You've been to an airport.
100%.
Just the basics.
Just the basics. If I had an idea of what a compass card was and what it looked like, that would have helped. Yes, undoubtedly.
Cool. Very cool. Okay, well, I kind of jumped ahead there, but so do you remember when you commissioned from Auburn as an ensign?
So that was early May of 2001.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. You led me right into my very next question, because I know it changed everyone's world. I was a very little kid on 9/11, but do you remember where you were? Obviously, you're in the Navy at that point.
I was in flight school.
You were in flight school.
I was in Corpus at VT-28.
What was that day like?
So I had a late night sim the day before, so I was at home, and my roommate called me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm sleeping, dude." He said, "You need to get downstairs. You need to turn on the news right now." So I said, all right. So I run down there and turn on the news, and I remember the first tower was already smoking, right? And they shut down the base. So my roommate and all of his classmates ended up coming over to our condo.
Okay.
And they come in, and we're sitting there talking, and then all of a sudden we see the second plane hit the tower, and that's when we were all like, holy shit, we're going to war.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, absolutely.
Because I won't say you joined, the military is always at war. You didn't join a peacetime service, but after that day, it was it was different. Is that something you guys felt? Again, I know you're brand new to the military at this point, but was it a distinct feeling? Was it something that the instructors kind of conveyed to you? Hey, this is real. This is going to define your career?
100%. Yeah. And it sure did. I mean, pretty much the totality of my career. Yeah.
Where you deployed to, and
Absolutely.
All right, cool. We'll get back to that. I'm sorry. I'm jumping. Just when you mentioned the date, it jumped at it.
Yeah, everybody knows where they were. Yeah.
I think they do. I obviously wasn't around during Pearl Harbor, but that's one thing that I've found interesting. People talk about 9/11. There's a really great book called The Only Plane in the Sky. It talks about different people's oral accounts on that day. And for whatever reason, this historian made a great point. Everyone always starts a 9/11 story with what I was doing, where I was, how I experienced it. So that's why I'm always curious to hear, how each individual. Yeah, how we all. I was a little kid. Second grade, third grade. It's been a hot minute, but I was a little kid. Okay, cool. So we'll jump back to where we are now, Pensacola. What was API, Aviation Pre-Flight Indoctrination? So for someone with no flight time, what was that like? That had to have been a lot to learn.
That was nerve-wracking, yes. And I think for anybody going through API, it's nerve-wracking because it's, 6 weeks of ground school, something like that, and all these subjects that I just wasn't familiar with, particularly navigation. I remember meteorology was a pain. I couldn't even tell you about all the other ones. But back then, there were all kinds of issues. So I wouldn't call them issues, but I would say challenges, right?
Okay.
So going through ROTC, you try and select pilot or whatever it is you want, right? And like you said earlier, you compete with all your peers to get what you want. And then I didn't do IFS, so I come to API. And there, you had to get, I believe it was a 90 or better.
Academic average?
Academic.
Oh my gosh, that's a high.
It was super high. I just remember it was daunting. And if you didn't get that high, then one, you either lost your slot and became an NFO, or they just kicked you out altogether.
Okay.
So
were they retaining folks? Would they make you a surface warfare officer or intel or something else? Or were you just out of the military?
You were out of the military altogether.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So a little bit of pressure.
A little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
So especially because I didn't stick with a STEM subject in school. So I'm like, wow, I'm going to be a French teacher. I don't think that's going to work out for me.
Totally fair.
So, yeah.
Was it something that you could work well with folks that you came up from Auburn with, or other folks you met? We always say cooperate to graduate, study with other people. Was that pretty natural, or was it you had to find a whole new group, a whole new circle of people and study together?
Yeah, no, actually, my roommate in primary was a friend of mine in ROTC. So we both came down from Auburn, started together, and I think he finished a week after I did.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, so for primary, it was good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned, kind of already alluded to it, that you went to Corpus for primary, right?
I did.
Was it something that was, I'll say, forced upon you? Was it your choice, or I know you only have two options. Well, no, actually, were there more options back then? Could you have trained with the Air Force?
You know, I didn't know that was an option then, but I think I could have, because when I moved on to intermediate and advanced, there were classmates of mine who had gone through Vance.
Okay, so and yeah, I guess I should back up. So now students can either go to Whiting, to the T6, there's 3 squadrons there,
Yep.
or Corpus, there's 2 squadrons there. I think kind of like I alluded to, the T6, I guess T-34, I don't know, it was the T-34 joint, but back in the day, basically, we had a bit more of an exchange between the Air Force. So we would send students and instructors, I think it was only to Vance Air Force Base?
Yes, that's right,
Yeah,
only Vance.
So that was the third option, basically.
I think some may have gone to Moody
Okay.
in Georgia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
it was
so.
a pilot training base for a short period, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. But either way, you got Corpus. You're headed to beautiful, beautiful Corpus Christi, Texas.
That's right.
First flight in the T-34. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So the thing about the T-34 is that you don't have nose wheel steering.
Did not know
Right?
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have to use differential braking
Okay.
to steer.
So it's just a free castering nose wheel.
It
basically.
is free castering, right?
Okay.
So between the the P factor off the prop and all that, and the brakes, you got to use that to steer the plane. And I remember my very first flight, taxiing was the most nerve-wracking thing ever. It was just so much over controlling, and at one point we're taxiing, and my on wing was a former 60 pilot, Kevin Black.
Okay.
Guy was hilarious, absolutely non-PC, but just so much patience. It was great. But I remember trying to get out onto the taxiway, and when I made the 90-degree turn, what I thought was going to be 90 was more like 135 degrees, so I kind of kicked off into the into the median, and ground called us and said, "What are you doing?" And my instructor got on the radio and he says, "We're learning."
That's the best answer.
It was.
Wow.
I mean, it was true. But yeah, that was just unbelievable.
So you could fly the airplane. I don't think you could fly with the cockpit open, but it's a little bit different than the T6.
It is.
It's not the, I guess is clamshell the right term for it, but basically, two, the students up front, instructors in the back, big turboprop engine. Do you wear the parachutes out to the airplane?
I don't think you did.
Okay. I might be thinking of like
I think
T6,
you took
like
them
World
out
War
with
II.
you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
okay.
then strapped in.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that first flight, having never, I'm just thinking back here. I've been flying since I was a little kid. I cannot imagine flying something that powerful for that first time, putting the power forward.
Yeah.
It
was
just hanging on by the static wicks, basically?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
What was the syllabus like? I think it's like 13 flights now before you solo. Was it about the same?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I recall that.
Any good
Yeah.
stories prior to solo? Solo to me is a huge memory for everyone. But
Yep. Solo was a big deal. No, I just remember, I'd say the first handful of flights, just wondering if I was ever going to get it. I recall trimming the aircraft was a pain, absolute pain. And I just couldn't, I felt like I couldn't get it. They said, well, you're going to feel like you're in, coordinated flight. And I was like, dude, I don't know what that feels like. I feel like this is about right. And then you let go of the stick and the plane banks and all that. So
yeah.
I recall that being really difficult to figure out. But everything else was pretty easy to learn. In Corpus, it's just you fly to the beach, you hang a left or you hang a right, and you climb up into your working area,
Yes,
Unlike,
course rolls are very easy.
yeah, unlike at Milton, I was like, dude, I'd totally get lost out here.
That's a little bit, go to the chicken ranch. And,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Very cool. So first solo,
yeah,
good time there.
it was a great time. Yeah, I had a lot of fun on my first solo.
Was it, so I know for when I went through, there's the initial solo, there was an aerobatic solo, there was a formation solo, but I'm told different programs, there was actually a little bit more solo flights. Does that sound about like what you went through in the T-34?
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing my initial solo, an aerobatic solo. I don't recall if I did that, because I did aero on my initial solo.
Really?
As I recall. Well, yeah.
You can't get flight violated
truth be
now,
told,
so.
yeah, exactly. They can't throw me out now.
They can't
but
get you now. Yeah.
I remember coming back from my solo flight and talking to my buddies, and I was like, dude, I was doing these spins. Those are pretty cool. And they were like, you did what?
You spun on your solo?
Yeah, they're like, you can't do spins on your solo. And I was like, what? Where's that written?
Probably in the SOP.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So,
But I mean, how awesome is that you had, okay, so I'm clearly not condoning NATOPS violations or SOP
Yeah,
violations.
right.
However, I have an Air Force friend that I got to sit down and do one of these, and he talked about in the T-37, they did inverted spins. That was part of the syllabus.
yeah.
And an inverted spin, as you know, is way worse than a normal spin.
Oh, yeah.
The sensations are backwards, all that. And he was like, oh yeah, that's what we just did. It's so interesting to me, like what was standard at different points in training, but then now,
Right.
for whatever reason, we teach, you recognize the approach to the stall and you recover. You don't go into a full stall. And that's the FAA kind of like, why? I actually really want to get in that stall and let people feel what it feels like on the backside. So that's so cool that whether it was approved or not, we won't legislate that, but that you had that training, that confidence, and you knew, yeah, I can get into it, I can get out of it, I know what the airplane's supposed to do.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Definitely.
You can't make up that.
I just didn't know better. So, but that was another lesson in, read all the instructions.
Yes, absolutely. So, okay, well, there you go. So, formation flights, instrument flights in the T-34. Was it pretty intuitive flying instruments?
No, instruments crushed me.
Okay.
So, I don't recall specifically what my NSS was, but it was pretty high, and I was ahead of my peers. I recall that. And then everybody said, "Hey, man, when you get to instruments, that's the great equalizer," and they were absolutely right. We all got smoked. So,
what made the difference? What helped you get out of that? Was it working with others? Was it a lot of time studying in the sim bay? Or?
It was just repetition.
Okay.
And experience.
You just have to do the thing.
It just do the thing. Yeah. So, just continue working at it. Back then, just the whole concept of trying to figure out where I am in relation to the station, and okay, so I'm on the tail of the needle, and the tail rises on the card sometimes, and so trying to figure all that out. Once I got it, it clicked, and it was just obvious. But to get there took some work.
Gotcha.
So,
formation stuff as well in the T-34?
Yeah, I did some of that,
okay.
And that was fairly easy, in my opinion.
I think forms is so, you say, I don't know, easy. It's definitely not easy for me, but it's intuitive because you immediately know if you're wrong.
Yes.
There's another airplane right there.
There's immediate feedback on that.
Immediate feedback, so you're never going to wonder, not to mention your instructor will tell you if you're wrong.
That's right.
All right, cool. So those are kind of the big building blocks going through primary. Tell me about, and by the way, I don't know if I asked, were you VT-27 or VT-28?
I was 28.
28. Is that the Rangers?
The Rangers.
The Rangers.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Boomers and Rangers are the two squadrons there.
That's right.
Okay. Going through VT-28, what's the selection process like? Is it you put your names down on a list and they hand you a sheet of paper? How do you find out where you're going for your next platform? / where did you want to go?
Yeah. So I wanted to go P3s.
Okay.
Because I didn't really know about E6s.
Okay.
Until after selection. That was such a small niche kind of thing. I didn't really know anything about it. And I knew that I wanted to go through flight school to become a pilot, and that ultimately my aspirations were to go to the airlines.
Okay.
Right? So anyhow, when selection came, our instructor said, hey, don't pick P3s because they're, I think the pipeline was shut down, something to that effect. And they said, so if you have jet scores, you need to select jets or else you're going helos. And so we were like, okay, well, I mean, getting to the airlines as a helicopter pilot is pretty difficult.
Indeed, yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, if I can't go P3s, I guess I'm going jets. So I picked jets.
Okay.
2 guys in my class picked P3s anyway, and they both got it. So I wasn't too happy about that.
Yeah.
So,
I don't blame you.
But, it's just one of those things that, when I went through flight school as a student, if my instructor told me something, that was gospel. And I just assumed that they knew exactly what was going on. So it never even occurred to me to try and pick P3s anyway. So that's how my story went. So
I don't want to tell a lesson from that, but if I can, and correct me if I'm wrong, I guess the thing I would say is, always having that questioning attitude, politely, respectfully, not you can take it too far, clearly, but wow, just that little bit of advice. And so I guess from an instructor perspective, that helps me remember, when I'm saying things, people are listening to every word, to every iota.
Every word.
Yeah, so you have to be so cognizant, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but words matter.
Yes.
So, okay, so you picked, how you said it was a couple folks going through at the same time you did?
Yes.
Like a class, maybe 4 or 5 people?
Yeah, there was a handful of us.
Okay, so those guys went P3.
That's
you
right.
said you went tailhook?
I did.
What about the other folks? Anything else memorable?
No, I think it was, I think we all went jets. There was a huge jet draft.
Wow.
And, but, my buddy, my roommate from college, he wanted jets in the worst way. And he selected a week after I did. His entire class got E2C2. And they just said, sorry, needs of the Navy.
Yep.
Class after him, everyone got rotors. No exceptions. And they were like, hey, that's the needs of the Navy. So, he ended up going through test pilot school. So at least he got some time in an F-18. So he was ultimately, I think he was happy. But he was very disappointed for quite a while.
I'll be honest, I want to be a jet guy. Yeah, to folks that don't understand what that's like when you've worked your whole career. I mean, for me, as a middle school student, I know I wanted to fly jets. To have wanted that and worked as hard as you can, and then I truly tell folks, it is number 1, needs the Navy. Number 2, your performance. Way down here, number 3, your desire.
Yeah.
So if it's not that's so crazy that the classes were that, bunch of jets, bunch of helo, bunch of ETC.
Do you think they'd be able to, I mean, we're talking about within weeks of each other. You think they'd be able to spread it out somehow?
I think they could have.
Oh, yeah.
If we're being honest, I think they could, but yeah. Okay, so where'd you go next?
So then I went to Meridian.
Okay. Oh, beautiful Meridian, Mississippi.
That's right. Yep. And I started in VT9, flying the T2 Buckeye.
No way.
Yeah. That was pretty sweet.
T2B or T2A?
C, I want to say.
T2C. Okay, so 2 engines.
Yep.
I recently, and this is one of the wonderful things about doing this, I assume a lot, I recently learned the T2A was a single engine jet. I did not know that.
Yeah.
The T2B and the C were both 2 engine.
Yep.
Okay.
So, and speaking of doing inverted spins, we did plenty of those in the Buckeye.
No, what is that like?
Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Okay.
That plane, when we would go up and do OCF, there were all kinds of maneuvers that plane could do that the T-45 definitely can't do. And it was enjoyable. I really liked it. Yeah.
I'm guessing probably because it's a straight wing jet. It's not a a delta, not a swept wing.
Yep.
Okay, so
Very
it's a little
forgiving.
more forgiving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Okay. Man, that's so cool. How was the T2?
It was a lot of fun to fly. It was very old.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, they decommissioned the entire fleet, I think, while I was there in Meridian. So, I want to say 8 months after I finished flying it, they decommed them. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So some tired airplanes.
So so I was one of the last to fly the Buckeye.
Is it the same general process as primary? You get a bunch of flights, you solo, and I know there's a lot more solos on the jet side.
Yes.
Then aero next, maybe then instruments, forms. Is it kind of the same flow?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it kind of was. So, but there's a lot more solo flying.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think they're just getting you ready for the fleet, and you're flying solo for the most part, in your section or in your division. So I remember it being pretty form intensive.
Okay.
So
was the T2 a good form platform?
I think so.
Very stable?
Yeah, very stable. Yeah.
What about instruments? I'm guessing at that point maybe a little antiquated compared to what was coming next, but...
A little bit. A lot like the T-34, though.
Okay.
Got the RMI card and all that. So
Just get lost faster, basically.
yeah, basically, yes.
Okay.
Everywhere under 10,000 feet had to be at 250 knots.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So you're boogieing. Cool. Did you go to the obviously FCLP's field carrier landing practice? Did you go to the boat at Meridian or?
I did.
Okay.
So, and that was after I finished VT9 and then went to VT7 flying the T45.
Oh, so you never
So-
went to the boat in the T2?
No. As a matter of fact, the only guys who did were E2C2 pilots. So,
Okay.
yeah, my roommate ended up in Meridian not long after I did, and he ended up going in the T2.
Okay, but you went in the T45.
That's right.
So I don't want to jump too far in back here, but let's talk about the T45 next. Was that a
Sure.
quantum leap between those two?
It was, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
You've got your digital displays and all that. It was a lot to learn. Yeah.
Good airplane, though.
So-
I mean, it seems like a wonderful machine.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I think instructors and guys that went on to fly the Hornet would tell you it's underpowered a bit, but I think it gets the job done.
Okay.
Yeah.
So was it just a very basic spin-up syllabus in the T45 so you could go to the boat and then that was it?
Yeah. So I recall doing weapons debts. So we took a cross country to Salina, Kansas.
Okay.
And I recall dropping Purple Death on on some ranges out there.
Okay.
Yeah. So you do that, and then there's going to the boat, and also ACM or BFM. I can't remember which one's
Yeah.
the Navy term.
I think BFM is the Navy, right? Basic fighter maneuvers or air combat maneuvering, something
Exactly.
like that.
Something
Okay.
to that effect. Yeah.
I'm told the airplane, and this is the only data point I have, at high AOA, I guess it'll pitch buck.
A lot.
Okay. So it's
Yes.
very distinct, clearly.
Very distinct. Yes.
Like to the point that you think it's going to depart, or is it just uncomfortable?
If you keep holding it, it'll depart. And
Okay.
so, basically, what folks say is that you want to ease off the stick a little bit, and then kind of bring the pull back in, and you just want to ride the ripple, is what they call it.
Okay.
And so it's just a very light pitch buck, and that's the very edge of the performance of the plane.
Okay.
But to be able to hold it right there in the ripple is difficult.
Okay.
Especially if you're a student.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a lot of reefing into pitch buck and then coming out of it, and then reefing back into pitch buck and coming out of it.
What were your instructors in the T2 and the T45? What were their background? Were they Hornet guys? Were they F-14 guys?
They
A4?
were all over the place, yeah.
Okay.
So there were some Marine Corps guys, a lot of F-18 guys, some Prowler guys, S3 guys.
Okay.
And there was even one or two P-3 guys who were there.
Really?
Teaching, yeah.
Okay. A lot of diversity there.
Yeah, there sure was.
I'm always curious what style works well and what style works poorly for teaching. Every student is different. I get it. Every instructor, every flight, everything's a little different.
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, were there any styles? I'm always very much, hey, I remember this person and the way they taught that day, and this worked or this didn't work. And so either I want to emulate that or I want to avoid that when I try to teach others and help others. Was that anything even at that early stage? I know you're still very new to it, still learning. Is that something you ever were able to kind of pick up on and notice?
Was I able to pick up on?
Did you like yellers? I guess is what I'm getting
No,
at.
I did not. So
Is that an effective teaching style?
No, it is not. And I think we've all come to realize that. But some people still hold that mantle. But the thing I noticed is that the personality types were predominantly that type A kind of personality, right? So definitely no coddling of any kind. It was just, hey, this is how it goes, and if you can't get it, you got to go. So that was.
We're going to hold the standard here, and you're going to rise up to it.
That's right.
Yeah. Not bringing it down for you to trip over.
Yeah, and if I got to yell at you to get you there, that's what is going to happen.
Gotcha.
So they're specifically sim instructors that went out of their way to yell at you while you were in the box, and their justification for it was that, well, hey, in the plane you can die. In the simulator, you're not going to. So they felt like in order to get that stress level across, that was what they needed to do.
Do you think that's an effective technique?
No, not really. I think it was unnecessary. But, I think we've come to realize that as we progress in our profession, And in training, that we realized that, hey, all these techniques that we use that we thought were useful, really, they're not. And so I like the fact that we've gotten away from a lot of that.
Yeah. And I don't think it makes anyone any weaker by any means. I've had someone debrief me like, hey, man, you did this, you would have died. And I'm okay. I'm listening now. If I wasn't then before, I don't need someone to necessarily yell to make that same point. As long as you're doing the right thing for the right reason, you understand the intent, and you're trying to make it very clear. Now, if the student doesn't pick up on it, maybe now it's a different conversation. But.
Sure. Yeah. And, I think the one thing I realized once I finished flight school and I came back as an instructor, and then, basically spent the last half of my career as an instructor, the one thing I didn't particularly care for were a lot of people that would come through and say, well, it sucked for me coming through flight school, so I'm going to make it suck for these guys too. The thing that I noticed almost to the man, the instructors that were the biggest hard asses amongst my peers were the shittiest students.
Really?
So, to the man.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is a great data point.
Yeah. So, hey guys, if you have an instructor you don't like, that is probably because they suck.
I think if you don't have confidence, you yell. If you don't have in your own abilities, when stuff is going wrong, if you can't compartmentalize, put that aside and focus on the actual problem and the actual solution, if you're just going to yell, we're not winning. We're not heading in the right direction.
No.
But that's just, I think sometimes, and this is a totally different conversation, but maybe like in greater society, we reward people. He who yells loudest is the smartest or the one in charge. And I like the term nerd assassin, which is totally not related to this, but like the people that can be quiet, confident, but they know what's up.
Yeah.
They're going to get stuff done. And I think aviation rewards that, but maybe not on the front end. You have to kind of mature and maybe into that role. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. But
No, it makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And by the way, I know we never got a chance to fly together, but that was always a data point that I had on you as the reserve CO, the SOW CO was, very calm, cool, collected, like not a yeller. I don't know that we have anyone that is a yeller at VT10. I'm sure someone is, but
no, yeah.
I respect that is what I'm getting at. It's something that you want to look to model, because that's, I think, how people learn. That's who people want to learn from.
Yeah.
So, or you can just beat them down, I guess. And
Yeah, I find that the best learning environment is one in which the student is comfortable. And if you're yelling at them, I noticed that when I was a student, that never helped.
Yeah.
So I never felt like I retained anything except, hey, here's what not to do.
I just want it to stop.
Yeah, exactly.
What do I need to do to make this stop? Yep. I'm not learning. I just want to get the airplane back and just finish yelling at me, and then we're done.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. No more yelling, I guess. So done with the T-45 at the boat? Is that when you guys finished the syllabus?
Yeah. So
what was that experience like going to the boat?
Oh man. So I ended up not passing at the boat. So that's
Okay.
That's my circuitous route to getting back to P-3s.
Okay.
So yeah. All right. So my first boat story. We went to qualify on the Reagan, right? Yeah, I think it was the Reagan. It's a
new carrier at the time.
New carrier. We were the very first class of students to carrier qual on the Reagan, right?
Wow.
And do you recall that it has 3 wires?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was built for some plane that we never picked up, right?
A12,
something like that.
Yeah,
Something to that effect. Yeah. So anyway, doesn't have 4 wires like a typical carrier.
Okay.
So I remember being at the boat, and I take my first trap, right? And so a lot of people talk about the cat shot coming off the front of the boat as being particularly violent. I thought that the trap was more violent. There's a lot going on. But anyway, I took my first trap, and I get in queue to get shot off the cat. And the air boss comes over the radio, and he calls me out by my side number, and he says, hey, hook up in the cat. And so I look at my hook handle, and it's up, and I just say, Roger, hooks up. And get in the cat, shoot off the front of the boat, drop the hook, come back around, trap again, right? So I'm in line again, and air boss comes over the radio again. This time he calls out my side number, and he yells, hook up in the cat. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on, man? I'm looking at my handle. It's up. Light's not on. So I come with the radio. I'm like, okay, verify my hook is up. He's like, yes, hook up. I'm like, all right, man. So I take off, come back around, trap, and I'm in line, and he calls me up again, and he says, in the most sinister tone I've ever heard, he's like, clearly, I'm not getting through to you. Why don't we bring you over here and chain you down, and you can talk to your XO on button whatever, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm clearly screwing something up, right? So Elwood was my XO, and can I use names?
Sure. It's your conversation.
He's long retired. Who cares?
Okay.
So anyway, Elwood calls me up. And he says, hey, sounds like you're having problems. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what's going on, but this dude's really mad at me. And he's telling me to put my hook up in the cat. But my hook's up. And he says, oh, what he means is he wants you to do a hook up pass. And so just do a touch and go.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, sir, how am I supposed to know what that means? I asked repeatedly for clarification, right? So
yeah.
Anyhow, he's like, that's what he wants you to do. Go do that.
So he's expecting you to do touch and goes each time you're getting a full trap, a full arrested landing.
Yeah, and so instead of doing that, he wants me to leave the hook up and just do a touch and go for whatever reason, right?
Yeah, that definitely makes no sense at all.
Yeah, no. So obviously, I'm a bit rattled, right? They unchain me.
I'm rattled.
And I come back around. Yeah. So I guess I did the hookup pass, and then the next pass, my hook's down, and I caught the one wire. And apparently, he was just like, that's it. Send him back to the beach. I don't want to see him again. So I wasn't even able to come back the second day to finish my carrier qual. That was it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that's my first story at the boat.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I already forgot the name. I wouldn't have to mention it again if you don't want to. But was it you said the XO's a Navy guy, Marine guy?
Navy guy.
Navy guy.
Yeah.
Is he up on the with the air boss, basically?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this is standard phraseology. This sounds like very non-standard phraseology.
No.
Okay.
Even when I came back and talked to instructors, they were like, okay, yeah. We know what that means, but we wouldn't expect you to know what that means. And I'm like, okay.
Definitely not a brand new student.
No.
Was that briefed? Your first couple bounces were going to be 2 touch and goes, and then you were eventually going to do arrested landings, or?
Yeah, I think that is how it goes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My very basic understanding. Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, he's like, "Hey, why is this guy taking a trap every single time?"
I had already done my first couple of traps.
Oh, okay.
So
I'm trying to find a way out here. I don't find a way out. This makes no sense.
To this day, I don't know.
Okay, so you said that was your first story.
That was my first story.
Okay.
So then you get a chance to go back, right?
Okay.
So the second time I go back and finish both days, and they said, okay, well, I think they called it your GPA. Basically, it said your boarding average. If it had been your first time going to the boat, you would have passed. But when you come back to the boat a second time, we upped the minimum. And so they basically said I fell right in the margin where I would have qualified if it was my first time at the boat, but since it was my second, I just barely missed the cut. So I said, okay. And back then, even during that time period, I was under the understanding that if you didn't pass flight school, you were out of the Navy.
Yep.
So I'm like, man, what's going to happen now? But they said, hey, your NSS is fine, so we're going to let you redesignate.
Wow.
So, so that's how I found myself going back to P3s.
Yeah. Holy moly. What a story.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I don't know what to say other than what a story. And I guess it shows how... I want to turn this into like something different. I'm like, oh, this is why communication is so important and all that. But even then, I don't know what could you have done differently? What could you have said? I don't know. I don't think there is anything.
No.
Yeah.
No. So.
Gosh. Okay. Well, but you know what? I do want to point this out: the fact that you had an incredibly successful career in the P3. What I'm saying is, came back from that, and that did not. I cannot imagine what that felt like. I know what it felt like when I thought I was going to get jets and I got helos. So I know a little taste of that.
Yeah.
I don't know anything what it's like to have done all that work.
Yeah. And then to come back.
Yeah.
Sure.
But that being said, so that process goes on. Obviously, they keep you in the Navy. They say, okay, you're going to go do maritime, which is what you wanted in the first place.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So why the P3?
So, as opposed to the E6?
Well,
or?
I was going to say, I asked that question, and then, there was no other. Now, P3, EP3, P8, there's a little bit of a selection, but then there was just the P3,
It was just
right?
P3 or EP3.
Okay.
That's right.
Let me ask you this way. What's the mission for the P3?
So, the P3...
Because it's changed over time. That's where I'm kind of headed next.
And so what they called it was a multi-mission aircraft, right? And I think they use that designation for the P8 as well.
Okay.
But the P3 started off as a ASW, anti-submarine, and USW, I believe, surface warfare.
Okay.
So basically, it was out there to patrol.
Okay.
So
4-engine turboprop.
4-engine turboprop, meant to be low, dropping sonobuoys, things like that.
Yep. So you have, I was going to say, armament. So you've got sonobuoys that are actively searching?
Both. You could drop active or passive sonobuoys.
Okay. It's a one-use thing. You hit the button, it's in the water. It works for some period of time, and then it's gone.
That's right.
Let's see. Torpedoes, you can drop?
You could drop torpedoes.
Okay.
And there are two different types of torpedoes back then. And then you could even fire Mavericks.
Harpoons, too, right?
Harpoons.
That's a big missile.
And Slam ER. Yeah, it was a standoff.
Okay.
Man, this is going way back.
I'm pulling all the acronyms out, yeah.
Standoff land attack missile, maybe?
But it's a big missile. It's a big warhead.
It's a big warhead. Yeah.
Is it something, and I'm jumping way too far ahead, did you ever get to fire any live ordnance or do anything like that in training?
I think I was supposed to go on 2 Slam ER flights, and these weren't back-to-back. These were over the course of several years, and neither one, I think both canceled for weather. So another crew ended up flying them just a day or two later. Yeah.
That's how that always turns out.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so when you start the P3 syllabus, you're actually not going to start in a P3. You're going to go to Corpus, right? Back to Corpus?
That's right. So back to Corpus to VT-31 to fly the T-44.
T-44, the mighty King Air.
Yeah, King Air 90.
After a T2 and a T-45, I'm guessing it was probably pretty intuitive?
Yeah, somewhat.
Okay.
Having non-centerline thrust was something to get used to, so that was a new experience. But essentially, I went through the entire contact phase, FAM phase, right? And then after that, it was first in stage, last in stage check ride for everything else in the syllabus. So it was just back to back to back check rides. And I think at one point I had to request a day off because I was like, dude, I can't keep up.
And what is the logic there? It's just you already have so much experience. They don't want to waste all those intermediate...
So much experience. Okay. I was basically already instrument qualified in the T-45 and the T2. So that was basically just, hey, just push them through.
So you wing out of Corpus?
I did.
Cool. Did you get your call sign in Corpus?
Actually, I got my call sign in Meridian.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the one that ends up, I remember we talked about it before we started recording, but I've had a couple. What's the current one?
Yeah.
The call sign, I guess?
Short round.
Okay. Any good story there?
Well, yeah, so...
if you can tell it.
So basically, it's very simple. Okay. So my buddies found out that I was half Korean, right? And so we all remember Indiana Jones in my time frame. And so they were all like, oh, you're short round.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah, mildly racist, but I've owned it. So, yeah.
There was an awesome photo of the actor, the photo obviously from the movie during your change of command ceremony.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll bet there's a good story there, but it was perfect.
Yeah.
Some people have really good call signs, some people have really dumb stories, but that was a good one. So,
yeah.
Or at least it is something. Okay, so got a call sign, got your wings. Where'd you go next? Where'd you learn to fly the P3?
So from there I went to Jacksonville to VP30.
Beautiful Jacksonville.
Where we all go.
Indeed.
Yeah.
It was the Pro's Nest, I think is what they call it.
The Pro's Nest, that's right.
Okay. I don't know why I know that, but P3C, right?
That's right. Yep.
I know nothing about the derivatives of the P3. Is that about as advanced as it gets? Where does that fall in?
It's about as advanced as it got, yeah. Okay. And then there were several upgrades to the Charlie model. I think AIP was the last one that I flew, and then there may have been an upgrade or two after I left.
Okay. What is that airplane like? I feel like now you're working with a crew. It's so much bigger.
Oh, it's massive. So,
okay.
Well, I thought it was then. So
yeah. You've flown bigger things since then.
Yes, but it was a lot of fun to fly. It was old, but I was impressed with the engineering of that aircraft, considering it was, I want to say, 50s technology. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Very stout.
Very, yeah.
Did it break a lot?
Yes.
I'm from an aging airframe, so I understand the feeling.
Yeah, there were a lot of times where you'd pre-flight one plane and it breaks for whatever reason. So you go over to a second airplane and pre-flight that one, and it breaks. But by then, they've fixed whatever it was on the first plane. So you go back to that plane and pre-flight that one again, and it was just, I recall that being a pain. Yeah.
Okay, so aircraft commander in the left seat?
Yes.
Co-pilot in the right seat. So is it a 2P? I want to make sure I get the terminology right.
Yeah, hold on. Is it? Man, I want to say it's backwards. I want to say the AC is in the right seat.
And the helicopter is. Yep, the helicopter, the aircraft commander usually would sit in the right, and then the co-pilot would sit in the left. Okay.
I don't quote me on it.
It's all good. But you have a 3P, so you have a third pilot usually. And that guy's in, is there like a center aft seat,
so
basically?
there's actually, so in the P-3 you have flight engineers.
Correct.
And you'll have typically two of those as well. And so the flight engineer sits between the two pilots, kind of in the back, where a jump seat would typically be on an airliner. And then to the left of that flight engineer was basically a radar cabinet, and it had a pad on top of it. So for takeoffs and landings, the third pilot would be sitting on the radar cabinet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So you're still up there. You're still part of the mix. Aircraft commander, they've signed for the aircraft. They're flying the whole flight, but you would switch in the 2P and the 3P. Is that just for training, or what was kind of the logic there?
Typically, it was for sortie duration.
Okay.
So we'd be on long flights, and you'd have to swap out.
What is a long flight in the P-3?
My longest flight was 14.2, I think.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that was definitely a record. Yeah.
That is a long flight.
That was a long flight.
So you can hold a lot of gas.
You can. So that particular flight involved a lot of two-engine loitering. So it's a four-engine aircraft, right?
Yeah.
And so you shut down 1 and 4, the furthest outboard motors, right? And just fly at max endurance, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredible. And I was about to ask about that because I know that's a very unique capability. I don't know there's a lot of other aircraft that do that will routinely shut engines down for endurance.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Yeah. Cool. So the mission set itself, do you become trained up in the mission at VP30 at all? Or is it just, hey, you're qualified to fly the airplane, you're going to be are you a 3P when you leave there?
You are.
You're a 3P. Okay. Or it might be a P. For us, it was 3P, 2P. Well, we called it PQM, pilot qualified and model. So you would leave the training squadron.
I think that's how it is. And then you get your 3P designation once you get to the squadron.
Okay.
Perhaps.
So very similar. Yep. That sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing, and I'm hoping you can maybe back me up on this, tell me if I'm right or wrong. So I had, when I went through VT6, one of my instructors, I'll name drop, Lieutenant Commander Hain, great guy. I loved flying with him. But he was a P3 guy, and he talked about kind of the minutia of some of the boards. So obviously, murder board, you're going to have flight evaluations, but then you're also going to have boards. And he said he had been asked once, how many inches fore and aft of the datum would the left seat move? And my brain, without knowing anything, I don't know, man, I'm going to hold the button down, I'm going to slide forward until it stops, and that's how far forward it moves. I'm going to hold the button down, slide all the way aft, and that's how far aft it moves. But that was not what the answer was that they were looking for on that board. Is that an accurate representation of some of the minutia that you guys might get into at times?
It's very accurate, yes.
Oh, gosh. That sounds terrible. Why? I say that not knowing anything more about it, but...
Yeah, so I think the general consensus was that we're not a fighter. So what we don't know in weapons tactics or things like that, we have to make things painful for ourselves in systems knowledge that doesn't nearly apply. I mean, who cares how forward or aft the seat moves? It's completely irrelevant.
Yeah,
but
I would think so.
The P3 community prided itself on harassment, in my opinion.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
And I've told a lot of that has been changed. The P8, it's a lot of the same people, but it's a new aircraft, and it was like, hey, we're going to have a new mindset going forward.
Yeah,
I don't know if
I
that's true or
think
not, but.
Yes, hopefully I think cooler heads prevailed.
Okay.
At least I hope. It's also a newer aircraft that you just can't get that kind of information from Boeing on the P8. They're not going to tell you how to do electrical phase checks and all of this other nonsensical stuff that they were trying to get us to learn.
Yeah. Any more memories from VP-30 before we leave the East Coast and head to your fleet squadron?
No. 30 was...
How long of a training syllabus was it? Was it pretty short?
That's a good question. I want to say I got there I want to say it was like 6 months probably, because I want to say I got there late in the year and then ended up finishing in April and getting to my squadron in April or May.
Okay. And I say where you went next. You stayed in Jacksonville.
I did, yeah. So I went to VP-45.
Right? What's the squadron name there? Anything?
The Pelicans.
The Pelicans. Very nice. Okay. How did it work? And the reason I mentioned that, I know there was P-3s at Whidbey at the time. There were P-3s at Jax, obviously. Were there P-3s anywhere else in the world?
Yeah. So back then there were P-3s in Brunswick as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Was that a desirable place? Did people want to go up there?
I think there were 2, maybe 3 squadrons up there. So I had several friends of mine that were at 30 with me that ended up going up there.
Okay.
Obviously, they bracked the base, right? Or at least decommed the squadrons. I want to say 1 was decommed and then 2 moved down to Jax.
Okay. And that Brunswick up in, was it Maine?
Yes.
I think, yeah. So that would have been kind of that base, and that design was, looking out toward the North Atlantic, sea lines of commerce into the U.S., patrolling that area. That's why you want those airplanes up there.
That's right.
So what's the logic behind Jacksonville? Where is it? Kind of Caribbean and south or east? Or?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think maybe the focus, the Soviet Union collapsed. So, as far as going out there and tracking Romeos and Oscars, that wasn't really a thing anymore.
Okay.
So I think they probably decided to reallocate and to focus more on particularly drug interdiction in Central and South America, or Central America rather, and things like that.
Was that something that you ended up doing some of those missions?
I did, yeah. Okay. So we were out of El Salvador for my second deployment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, drug interdiction.
Definitely want to get to that, and you mentioned that some of the different locations. And I'm cheating here. So from the resume, obviously you deployed to Okinawa, Japan, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq, El Salvador, Sicily, and Djibouti.
That's right.
That is a lot of different places.
A lot of different places. Yep.
Okay. Well, let's go around the globe. So I know the Middle East a little bit, i.e., Bahrain.
Yep.
Kind of talk through, because I think the one's kind of more interesting, honestly, to me, is Iraq. So it's a maritime aircraft. We're using it, against, like you mentioned, different Soviet submarines. But then after 9/11, there was a bit of a transition, a bit of a mindset of, hey, here's another way we can employ the airplane. Is that something you guys learned as you were at the squadron, or was it already kind of developed and codified, and then you went out and did it in the desert?
Yeah, I think it was already developed. Particularly, there were Kosovo, when all that stuff was going on in Bosnia and all that, we were doing, this was before my time, but they were doing ISR missions, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So the equipment that we had aboard the aircraft, along with the Ames turret, so it's basically an EO and IR camera. So it can see in the day and the night.
That's more information than we needed. Yes. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so you have this camera that you can see things with, and then obviously other equipment on the plane.
Okay.
That I can't really go into, but
not at all. Yeah, but you all were based overland. You were based in the country of Iraq.
We were.
Was it flying Iraqi area missions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it sure was. So we were in at Ali Air Base in Talil, Iraq, and man, we were all over. We were over Baghdad, up northwestern Syria. It's kind of all over the place, and of course down south by the Gulf and all that. Yeah.
Okay. What was it like flying in that airspace? Was it pretty? I mean, obviously at that point the war is over. There's a U.S. presence in the country. It's not like you're flying against Iraqi MiGs or anything. But what was that like?
So it was, obviously a lot of military there. So as far as coordinating the airspace, that wasn't too difficult. But they did have man pads there. So yeah, we got shot at several times.
Really?
So yeah, and when you're up at that altitude, you don't really think they're gonna get you, but they came pretty close.
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, you're within the lethal range of that.
Oh yeah.
That weapon.
Yeah. Gosh. Surprisingly.
Wow. Okay. Any good Iraq stories, or I don't want to say fun, but any memorable flights? I mean, what time of year were you there? I'm guessing it was probably pretty warm.
Yeah, no, actually, it got really cold, man.
Really?
So we were
Okay.
there in October, September, October
Okay.
timeframe, or maybe October, November, and it was brutally cold.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that I've always told folks about Bahrain, and I know Bahrain's an island, so a little bit different, but we would get low fog, clouds, whatever you want to call it. Was that something that you guys would see overland up there as well? I wouldn't think of the Middle East as a place where you get low fog and clouds.
Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of that, yeah.
Okay.
So some overcast, some days that we just couldn't fly. Yeah.
You're an incredibly capable instrument airplane, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I'm guessing what? ILS, VOR, Tachyon?
Yep, NDB.
Oh,
well,
wow.
Hold on. Was that in the P-3? I don't recall.
But I mean, you're going back to a big runway. You're designed to land there, so
Yes.
it's not like you're going back to the back of a boat or something.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. Yeah.
Cool. So very, very capable machine. Was that first deployment, second? I know I'm kind of jumping around with locations here, but
Yeah, so my first deployment, we typically had dedicated East Coast and West Coast deployment sites, right? So if you were an East Coast squadron, you would typically see certain locations, and then West Coast would see others. When we deployed, we saw all of them.
Really?
So, yeah, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
Yes,
So
that's so cool.
We started off, at least for my crew, we were in Kadena first, and then spent some time up in Misawa, Japan, and then made our way over to Bahrain.
okay. This is all in one deployment.
All in one deployment. Yeah, so you
Really?
would typically spend a month and a half or so at each location. And so, yeah, we got to Bahrain, and then, and then spent about a month and a half or 2 months, somewhere around there, in Iraq.
Okay. The reason that's really interesting to me is that obviously I think it's 7th Fleet that owns the Japan part of the world.
Yes.
5th Fleet owns the Middle East.
Yeah.
So you're chopping, is it chopping? I think that's the right term, but you're moving between fleets on a single deployment.
That's right. Yep.
Wow. One airplane, two airplanes?
Yeah, well,
It depends, I'm sure, is the
yeah,
answer.
it depends. They
Okay.
kind of swap back and forth. So we
Okay.
actually flew a plane from Japan to Bahrain.
Okay. Probably not nonstop, but
No, so
Close
we
to it.
took several stops. Yeah, I got to think about this.
it's a long flight.
It was a long flight, yeah. So, but now I'm trying to think about it, because I feel like we took it from Bahrain to Japan.
Okay.
Yeah, because I recall, stopping in Diego Garcia, so just out in the middle of nowhere, and then Thailand, and then the last stretch to get to Japan.
What do you cruise at, airspeed-wise, in a P-3?
So, I want to say it was in the 200s. You could do man, that plane could haul ass, actually. It could get up to 300, maybe 350. But when I was there, there was HONA restrictions.
Okay.
I want to say it was basically an hours and airspeed and G restriction, because the wing spars were aged a lot longer than they anticipated, right?
Okay.
So I think what they did was they took them up, and they were doing failure tests on the wing spars, and they were breaking a lot earlier than they anticipated. So they realized they were a lot farther along in their service life. So I don't think we were allowed to do any more than 300 knots. I think that was the limit.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my guess being that airplane, you live, when you're doing the anti-submarine environment, low, down by the water, you're getting thrown around. That probably put a lot of advanced life cycles on that airplane sooner
I
than people
think
thought.
so. Yeah. So, and I think corrosion probably had a little bit to do with it as well.
Saltwater environment,
So,
that'll do it. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Djibouti. At what point did you spend some time in
So
Africa?
that was my second deployment.
Okay. And I guess I should jump back and forth to mention that first one. Are you still a 3P, a 2P? Where are you in your training cycles?
3P for most of it,
Okay.
because I showed up to the squadron, and 2 weeks later we were on deployment. So as soon as I showed up, we deployed.
That's fast.
So I was 3P, I want to say, that entire deployment, and then picked up my 2P qualification after that.
So did your board and everything, all your check rides,
That's right.
out on deployment?
Yeah.
Wow.
I sure did.
Okay.
Yep.
What was that like? Was that pretty...
So, yeah, I mean...
You got to get it done, I guess.
You got to get it done, man. Yeah, I remember doing flights in Misawa, some check rides.
Okay.
And, because the plane's so big, we would just pile a bunch of us on there that needed training.
Sure.
And we just knock it all out at once. Yeah.
Gotcha. So a lot of bounces, a lot of touch and goes, I'm guessing.
Yeah, sure thing.
Were you legal to shut an engine down and do the dreaded 3-engine approach? Is that a thing, or was that only with certain instructors?
3-engine was very common.
Okay.
Very common. 2-engine was, it was somewhat common. There were some restrictions, but every time we did our annual NATOPS flights, you had to do a 2-engine shutdown, and it was you wouldn't shut them completely down, but it was always asymmetric, so it always had to be 3 and 4 or 1 and 2, right?
So it was just the worst possible
scenario.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yes.
And you had to do, I believe, a 2-engine approach, 2-engine wave off, and then a 2-engine landing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm guessing a boot full of rudder when that's going on.
Oh, yeah.
Got to stay ahead of it.
Yep, a whole lot.
What's the and I'm not a multi-engine guy yet.
Yeah.
What's the critical side there? I obviously, based on P factor, I'm trying to remember, is it left side or right side?
Oh man,
I'm not trying to test your knowledge.
Way back, yeah.
But the reason I mention that is basically at a certain point you may run out of rudder. You might, I'm just going to make this up. 1 and 2 are secured, so I got 3 and 4 in some kind of a wave off. I go full power, and if I'm not ahead on the rudder, the airplane could theoretically VMC roll.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
so that
right.
could happen in a P3.
Yes. Yep. So, as a matter of fact, there was a plane. I want to say out of Hawaii, I believe. They had that exact same issue. So they had one shut down, and then they pulled the second one back to simulate a 2-engine scenario, right?
Okay.
And then they got slow. And so the instructor firewalled the 2 motors and basically put them into a spin, right? They adverse yaw, right?
An airplane that big.
Yeah, that big. And they scooped it out with less than it was close, a couple hundred feet, maybe less.
Lord.
Yeah. And apparently the FE firing up the remaining motor and pushing it up all the way really helped them scoop it out and save the day.
Might have been what made the difference.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh my gosh, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
That's a big airplane to do something like that.
It's real big. That plane never flew again. So
so it's overstressed the airplane.
Yeah, you could see it was on the ramp, and you could see all the rivets that were popped out of the wings. I mean, it was definitely bent. Yeah, so done.
Yeah. Wow. So but that really is testament to the Lockheed engineering and how strong that airframe is.
Yeah.
To survive something that bad.
Yeah, it was impressive.
Yeah. Wow. The crew concept. So I kind of want to get back to it. Well, not 2 folks, 3 pilots up front, technically, between those rotating positions, 2 flight engineers, kind of round out the rest of the airplane. Who do you have in the back? What's it for? I'm going to say standard, big air quotes here, but a standard mission set.
So standard mission set, behind the flight station, you have on the left side of the aircraft is the TACO. He's the tactical coordinator. He's the senior navigator. To the right of him is the navigator, the nav. And the navigator does typical things that we think a navigator would do, right? Plotting your position, making sure all that's going. The TACO has a huge screen in front of them, and it's basically all the inputs from the radar operator, who's further in the back, and then you had 2 operators that we call JES operators, and they would basically, they had multiple roles. When you're doing ASW, they listen to the buoys, right? And they pass up pertinent information about what they're picking up on the buoys to the TACO, and that all shows up on his screen, all right? And then he can see the radar picture and all that too if he needs. So, and then you've got in the back, you've got the IFT, the in-flight technician, right? So anything that goes wrong, he's fixing it, right? And then I think you could have another crew member who would also be an IFT, and if they had to manually deploy sonobuoys, they could drop them out the chute. Okay. So,
and I don't need to know a number, but I'm guessing you carry a lot of sonobuoys.
Yeah.
And then you have I hate the term bomb bay, but there is a. Is it a?
There is a legit bomb bay on the P-3 up front. Yeah.
Okay. But there's not sonobuoys in that bay.
No, so that would be equipped for torpedoes.
Okay, so torpedoes are carried internally up front.
That's right.
Sonobuoys are kind of aft.
Yeah, you could carry torpedoes. You could carry mines.
Really?
But typically we would have
Like a fuel tank or something?
Yeah, no, it would be a large container basically for our luggage. Whatnot.
Okay. I guess it'd be like a blivet on a jet, but
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, something
That's
like
awesome. Wow. Yeah. Big airplane.
Yeah.
A lot going on. What's that crew mentality like? Because you're learning that leadership role as you step up from 3P to 2P to aircraft commander.
Yes, and in that capacity, you have to work together, and you've got a crew of 8-10 people, right? And they run the gamut from E1 essentially all the way up to O5 or higher. So I really enjoyed the flying and the teamwork. That really appealed to me. So it was a lot of fun.
Kind of a natural thing.
Yeah, and it's just the whole working together to get the mission done and all that. And there's so many of you involved, and yeah, and of course you're all up on ICS, so you're
everyone can hear one another.
Everyone can hear one another. It was
all
great.
their thoughts. Yes.
Yep, absolutely.
It might sound silly. One of the things that never occurred to me that I really enjoyed learning how to do in the 53 was I love flying. I've been flying since I was a little kid. So to me, I'm enjoying it when I'm going out, even if it's an FCF fixing a broken helicopter or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Not always the case. Not everyone necessarily wants to be there that day or has something else maybe they'd rather be doing at times. And as you mentioned on ICS, you will then hear about it.
Oh, yeah.
And so keeping everyone tracking, hey, here's the mission set, here's what we're doing. Let's, it's you and I versus the problem, not you and I versus one another. And I'm sure the grammar's wrong there. But anyway, I never would have thought in a million years that I'd have to kind of, at times, not often, just to be clear, this was a very rare thing, but occasionally, kind of focus everyone's efforts together and move forward in the same direction.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything that, I don't know, I never really read about or expected or prepared for. It just kind of happened and like, oh, hey, how are we going to, I guess we're going to handle it this way because, we're all on the same aircraft doing the same mission here. So any thoughts on that? Like, is like I said, was it something that came naturally to you or you just kind of develop it over time?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like quite a bit of it was natural, but yeah, it definitely developed.
Some people don't do it well. Not everyone is meant for a multi-crew aircraft.
No, and those people typically highlighted themselves pretty early on, and you give them tips and advice, and there's only so much you can do, and a lot of them did improve, some of them didn't, but having that entire crew, it's basically something you could work around if you needed to.
Gotcha.
So
you're coming up on aircraft commander, still obviously through your whole fleet tour. So we talked about all the different locations. Was it one or two major deployments that then had multiple locations mixed in, or?
Yeah, two major deployments with multiple locations. And then I remember as soon as I picked up my aircraft commander qualification, we were doing surges. And so you would send a crew with an aircraft to whatever deployment site other squadrons were at, and they would basically just augment and support those squadrons.
Okay, so you just got your letter, the ink is still wet.
That's right. And
Go out and do it.
I was back to off to IUD'd.
The deed.
Yes, the deed, man.
I've never shut down there,
So,
but I'm told that's the best way to experience the deed is not to shut down. What was Qatar like?
Yeah, so Qatar was Air Force run, right?
Indeed, which focused in your career later.
Yeah, it sure did. So, but having our own crew there was really a lot of fun, being away from mom and dad. And obviously we're helping out the other squadron, right? And we're getting our work done. But that's the thing. Once you get your work done, you go play. So
what playing could you do?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You couldn't really do much because they were very adamant about your 3 drinks a day, right? So that was definitely restrictive. But what I do recall is they had us in these long trailers, right? And I can't remember how many rooms per trailer, but the TACO, I believe, on our crew, Tim, he had a Xbox and a projector, and so we would all hang out in his room and play Gears of War.
It's funny how little stuff like that makes a deployment go by.
Oh man, it was a daily occurrence. It was great.
Gotcha. That's awesome. What kind of mission set was it out of IUD?
Yeah, so IUD was a lot of what do we call it? Double SC,
Okay.
So I can't remember what it stands for, but basically you're checking out contacts out on the water that are not reporting on what is that ships always have to report on?
TIS, I think, the traffic information system.
Yeah, something to that effect.
A ship
right?
transponder, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we basically go out there and we take a broad brush sweep with the radar, and then anyone who's not reporting, we go check them out.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Is it I always, for some reason, thought it was a weather radar up front. It's a weather and a search radar, or primarily a search radar?
Oh, it's primarily a search radar. You could use it for weather, but it was, that was the purpose.
Pretty good fidelity. I mean, it did what it needed to do.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
I've never flown with a radar, clearly, so that's why I was curious.
Yep. The, I want to say the AIP only had a front radar.
Okay.
The beam up, I think, had 2 radars, fore and aft.
Okay. So, and that's what I was going to ask next. Yeah, do you have any way to get that data in front of that? The guys in the back are the ones interpreting that and then kind of driving the show.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you can't see it from the front seat, is what I'm trying to indicate.
No, we had a repeating screen. It was definitely small.
Small, yeah.
But I don't think the radar picture showed up there. I think that the radar operator would tell us, hey, we need to come so far left or right.
Okay. That teamwork we were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. To get us through where we needed to go.
And you mentioned searching for surface contacts, I should say. You fly low. I mean, this is not at all times, but the airplane, it's not like you have to be up at 10,000 feet at all times. You can get down low if you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're just scanning surface contacts, 1,000 feet, something like that. But when we were doing ASW, you'd be at 200 feet if you had the capability.
And is that
rat out had to be operable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Below the weather in many cases.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How would you, so just hypothetically, let's say there's weather out in the area.
Yeah.
Can you do some kind of a letdown to get below it, or is it you have to get down there visually? I'm sure there's techniques, and I don't know to talk through that, but is that something weather's bad, we're done, or is there ways you guys can kind of work the system?
So there were a lot of times you'd be out there and you'd be due regard.
Wow.
And so, you just do whatever you want to do.
Okay.
So, you fly through clouds, no one's giving you IFR separation, you're just doing what you do.
Is that a comfortable feeling?
Not always, no.
But you have I guess the difference is you have a radar. So I had an experience in Bahrain where a friend of mine was flying through some 500 feet, maybe coming back into the island, and saw shipping containers in the clouds.
Wow.
And what it was, he couldn't see the bottom of the ship or the top of the ship, but it was one of those large international shipping container carriers.
Yeah.
And just through a break in the clouds, he saw them co-altitude and said, oh, hey, we need to come up a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but again, you have a radar. You can see stuff out there. For us, it's Mark 1 eyeball.
Yeah.
So, not the same.
That's uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the reason I was asking. So, gotcha. You talked about the anti-sub mission set. Was that one that you got to fly? Obviously, probably not in the 5th Fleet AOR, but is that something you guys got a lot of practice and got really good at?
Yeah. So, we had a decent amount of practice with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
So I enjoyed it. Yeah,
it seems very challenging.
Laying these patterns, it's very challenging. So it takes the anti-submarine mission takes really good coordination between all of the crew members, the TACO and the JES operators and the pilots. So the TACO basically makes it all happen as far as getting the field distributed where it needs to be in relation to whatever target it is you're after. And then the pilots have to make sure that the plane is in the proper position to, one, lay the field as it needs to be laying, and then, to drop a weapon if we need to.
Absolutely.
So, So, a lot of that would make or break cruise. Yeah.
Okay.
That mission, sure.
I imagine it would be because that's the original. It's the original mission set for the airplane. That's what you guys are there to do. Even as you guys transition to more of an overland ISR at times,
yes,
still you got to be able to go out and kill submarines.
100%.
Gotcha. Any good, stories in the weather? Manpads seem pretty freaking exciting to me over Iraq, but any good emergencies maybe?
Yeah, well, let's see. Yeah, there are some hairy stories, man. Getting shot at, got intercepted a few times.
By who?
Let's see, Chinese fighters.
Oh my, yeah.
Finbacks, maybe? Fishtails too, something like that. I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, but that was on more than one occasion.
Okay. Was that a pretty routine? I mean, you guys have, hey, here's what we're going to do when they come up. You're ready for them.
Yeah, we definitely had a good idea of when they would show up and, what to do in case they did. And, of course, it was always on our minds because when, going all the way back to when I was in school, right before I graduated Auburn, there was that EP-3 crew that collided with that fighter.
Yes.
The fighter collided with them. Just
to be clear,
clarify.
yes, the fighter hit them.
But, so those guys ended up having to do a forced landing in China.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was always on our minds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then let's see, back to the Middle East doing a Straits transit. Is it Straits of Hormuz?
Yep.
Yeah. Got intercepted by an Iranian P-3. Yeah.
Dissimilar form. I guess it's similar form at that point. They're P-3C too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just not, you didn't do a brief ahead of time. So.
That's right.
They intercepted you with a P-3. What the?
Yeah, so we're just doing a Straits transit, and like I said, the AIP aircraft didn't have a rear radar.
Okay.
So this guy overtook us and came. I distinctly remember I was sitting in the right seat, and I thought maybe my one or two were over speeding. I just remember the noise.
Engines.
Yeah, I thought maybe the engines were over speeding. I looked at the gauges, everything looked good, and when I looked out to the motors, I see this P-3 right next to us, and it is so close. I mean, striking wingtips close.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah.
I would have been pissed.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Gosh. And they just hung out and then...
No, they were overtaking us. I mean, as soon as I saw them, we couldn't even get the cameras out in time to get a good picture of them until they were well ahead of us.
Okay. Everyone obviously being in international airspace and all that, that jazz. They're just there to...
Exactly.
Those things are painted blue, right?
They are, yeah. The blue, like the Russian jets, the blue camouflage scheme, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting for sure. Any good memorable EPs, things that... Were you an FCP when you functional check flight pilot? Was that something that was a common qual? Was that something only some folks got, or how did that work?
Yeah, I don't recall it being a real common qual.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, it wasn't, because once you were the FCF guy, man, that was pretty much what you were doing.
So you didn't strive for it, I'm guessing? That's something you wanted necessarily then?
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought it was cool because, it's interesting doing maintenance test flights, I guess you could say. Doing all that I enjoyed doing that. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Gotcha. Any memorable stuff? I jokingly say I kept a note in my phone of all the EPs I had in the 53.
Yeah.
And 70% were on FCF.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say mine were necessarily on FCFs, but I probably need four hands to count how many 3-engine landings I've done.
For real, though?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I've had to shut down a motor many times. I had a 2-engine landing once. So that was, but it was pretty much symmetrical. I think it was 2 and 4, something like that.
Okay.
So
makes it so much easier.
Yeah, it was. And it was down in El Salvador. So I want to say Camalapa is like a 11,000 foot, maybe 13. It's a long runway.
Okay.
So it was a pristine day, very low winds. They have an ILS, so wasn't terrible. Yeah.
Gotcha. Do you have beta on those engines?
You do.
So you can set it down and then go into reverse power and slow yourself
absolutely.
down. Okay.
Yep. So plenty of chips lights. Yeah. I think I had a firelight once, but it was those detectors were somehow, I believe, if light got into the engine compartment, it could inadvertently set off that loop, right?
Yep, sunrise or sunset. Yeah, the 53 had those old detectors as well. You would turn to confirm, and sometimes in that turn, that would be just enough to get the light off the sensor, and it would go away.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I assume it's the similar design.
Yeah. So for us, if we got the light, we'd shut it down, but no secondaries, no.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think is really critical, I had one flight where I popped a motor. identifying the correct motor, as silly as that might sound. Because for us, everything powers the one main rotor head.
Yeah.
So those different things as things split, assuring yourself you've got the right. Mine, one of the engine, no torque, and the other two were giving me torque. It's pretty simple which one it was.
Yeah.
We had a mishap in Bahrain long before my time where someone over the runway ripped the wrong engine back. So they lost one. And then in that moment of no dual confirmation, he just reached up and pulled the other one back. And now you're hanging this very heavy aircraft on one motor, and they took it to the ground. So crew coordination it was not just words. No fast hands in the cockpit is not just a saying.
Exactly.
Yeah, you got to work together as a team. Cool. So finishing up in the P-3, was that when you finished in the P-3, was that like your last flight in a P-3 ever when you left Jacksonville?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That
was it.
Kind of a bittersweet moment.
I knew that I didn't really have any aspirations to go back to the community.
Okay.
So I knew that was it.
Gotcha. But when you left, you went somewhere, I think, incredibly unique. Place I didn't even know you could go until I heard about it. Where'd you go next?
So I went to Vance Air Force Base, and I flew with the Air Force, flying T-1s.
In the T-1?
Yeah.
That has been a very rare thing. I can't ever imagine anyone going there now.
In fact, they don't anymore.
Okay.
And it's kind of a long story. I think when people talk about luck and timing, that has been a key factor in my career, in my opinion, multiple times.
Yep.
So when I was up for orders, I want to say it was December. Right? So I called the detailer and I tell him, hey, I just want to keep flying. I want to go to Sinatra. And the detailer says, well, Sinatra's closed for the rest of the year. And I said, the fiscal year? And he said, yeah. I was like, dude, we're not even done with the first quarter. What are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, it's done. I think he said we were overmanned.
Okay.
So, anyway, I knew about Vance from guys I had gone through flight school with, and I said, okay, well, what about Vance? And he said, oh, yeah, I got a bunch of billets there. I was like, all right, send me there. So I thought I was going to fly the T6. I didn't even know you could go fly the T1. And I remember when my orders popped on BOL, I looked at T1 Alpha, and I was like, I don't even know what this is, so I had to Google it.
What is this airplane I want to go fly?
Yeah, and so, of course, when I saw it, I just hit the roof. I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And I went into the skipper's office, and I was like, sir, I'm going to fly T1s with the Air Force. And he's like, what? Do you want me to call the detailer and change your orders? I said,
No.
Hell no.
Yeah.
Don't do that. And he said, oh, okay, well, I thought you wanted to, pull G's and T6 and all that. And I was like, well, I think this is better. I'm going to stick with this. So, so off I went, and I ended up going to Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. And so the Air Force does things a little bit different for their instructor training. So for us, it's basically whatever wing you get to as a prospective instructor, you go through the FITU, the Flight Instructor Training Unit, right? And it's somewhat in-house, I guess you could say. For the Air Force, they have what they call PIT squadrons. It's Pilot Instructor Training Squadrons, and they are dedicated to creating instructor pilots and then sending them out to whatever wings are available for that instructor, right?
Okay.
So everyone goes to Randolph to go through PIT. So I want to say it was a 5 or 6 month course, something like that. But the difference with the Air Force training is that when you finish PIT, you are fully qualified in every stage of training. For us, you get 2, maybe 3 quals, and then you work your way up to getting a 4th or 5th qual, right? That's not how they do it. So they knock it all out in one fell swoop and then send you off to Vance Air Force Base in Enid, Oklahoma.
Beautiful Enid, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Well, since you've done both, and I guess I should also make sure I mention it, when you were the reservist CO here, you were also a FITU instructor. So you taught us an instructor pilot. So you made instructor pilots that would then make student NFOs.
Yeah.
So you've seen both I guess you haven't seen Pitt as an instructor pilot, but I guess what I'm asking is, which is better? And that's way too simple of a question.
Oh, yeah.
What are the pluses and minuses of those two? Because I can think of a couple, but you've actually lived it. So I'm really curious, which do you value more, kind of the pluses and minuses?
Yeah, the thing that I liked about the Air Force training, with respect to how it trains its instructors and also how it just trains its pilots, is it is regimented, but it is exceptionally well organized. When you go through flight training in the Air Force as a student, you start today, and they tell you that come today, next year, you're going to be winged. You're going to be qualified. In the Navy, it's not like that. They're like, hey, you start today, we might get you done in a year. We might get you done in 2. We don't know, right? And so I was always very impressed with how the Air Force was able to do that, because it was irrespective of weather or other issues. It was exceptionally well run, well organized.
How do you think they make that happen? Is it just a different, maybe there are more assets, more bases, more volume to throw at the problem than we do?
Yeah, I think, they probably have a lot more assets, but as far as the organization of it all, that's a good question.
I genuinely don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I'm curious, because I know they do it very, very differently, like you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stand-up, was that your first time? Did you get to do stand-up as an instructor?
Yeah, so the benefit of going to fly the T1 is that that's what they train in the advanced portion of their flight training. So I saw what stand-up looked like, and so for the uninitiated, stand-up is where you stand up literally in front of everyone, all your peers and the instructors, and they give you some scenario, right? And you have to ask all the questions, all the background questions. What's the ATIS? A lot of times it's just really mundane questions,
You got to build the
things
picture.
you wouldn't think of. Yeah, but they're like, oh, well, you didn't build the picture quite well enough. You know how the Air Force is, very meh.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
they want you to immerse yourself in that environment, literally put yourself in the situation.
yes, I would say they take chair flying to the next level, right? I'd say that's a good way to explain it.
Yep.
So anyhow, if I were to show up as a T6 instructor to T6 pit, they treat you just like a student.
Wow.
Yeah, they run you through stand-ups all the time. But for us, it was more of a thing of, okay, you've experienced that, so let's move on.
Okay. Was it a real big cadre? Was there a lot of Navy folks there, or was it pretty much just you and maybe another?
No. So when the reason we were sending Navy students through T1 training, they were solely for E6 pilots.
Really?
And so, so what they were doing is they were sending E6 students through the T1 syllabus because it's a multi-engine jet, glass cockpit for the most part. And it was just more analogous, I guess you could say, to flying a 707.
And obviously now we don't. Those folks do the T-44 or TC-12 or
don't.
whatever.
Yeah, and so basically in Corpus, when they updated all of the T-44s to the ProLine 21 setup, so it was all glass cockpit, mode control panel and all that, they decided that with that upgrade, we wouldn't need to send students to T1s anymore.
Okay.
Which,
what did we lose by doing that?
Well, you're talking about a twin-engine prop compared to a twin-engine jet. So, and so it basically, it's a larger leap, in my opinion, to go from a King Air 90 to a 707, right?
Yes.
Whereas you're flying around T1 and you're going from a jet to a jet.
Yeah. Fast, high.
Yeah, exactly. All that, right? So, but, who am I to say what the Navy does with their training? But when I showed up to the 32nd as a T1 instructor, I was one of 4, maybe 5 Navy guys. And when I left, I was one of 2. And the last guy left the month after I did because the program was literally shut down the very next month. So
was it a warm reception? Were they glad to have the Navy there and instructing?
Yeah, it was.
Great.
It was, man, I really enjoyed that tour. It was a lot of fun. I made a lot of good friends, had a lot of great experiences. It was just, a great experience all around.
So what is the syllabus like for those folks? Because like you said, it's advanced flight training, so they've done a T6. Now they're going to fly the T1 prior to some kind of a big wing.
That's
T130,
right.
135, whatever. So is it same thing? They don't do they Brolo? Do they solo? Is that a thing?
No, well,
We'd call it a Brolo if it was 2 students in the helicopter. So.
yeah, so they did have, we didn't do it, but I think it fell out of favor and then maybe it came back later on. But basically 2 students would take a T1 and go get lunch somewhere. They would basically do an out and in, you know.
Okay.
They go
Yeah.
fly somewhere, get lunch, and then come back.
Sure.
Or maybe you just let them do a round robin circuit of, you know, Texas or something.
Yeah. Okay.
But they weren't doing it while I was there.
Okay.
But I heard that they brought it back or something to that effect. Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. Basic form syllabus, right? Because they're getting those guys to go up, get ready to do aero refueling.
Yeah. So we would
basic.
do the FAM stage like we do, and then the instrument stage, and then part of their instrument stage was also a visual navigation stage, right?
Really?
So they would
Nice.
they would go on an instrument flight, chop VFR, and then they would have to call flight service and activate their VFR flight plan, right? I'm like, come on, dude, you're flying VFR. But anyway, and then on their sectional, they basically drew out their course and their timing and all that, and they would go from one point to another, and they would basically plan all this out before you flew. And then at the end of their VFR strip, you know, they have to get there within plus or minus a minute or whatever have you. And then they'd have to activate their IFR flight plan and pick up IFR again and then continue with their instrument flight. Yeah.
That's really kind of neat. I mean,
Yeah.
you might not, would you do that in the real world? I don't know.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you can at least have the skill set once, I'm a big fan. I've ranted about it before. I'll rant about it, I guess, briefly here. Like, I love paper charts.
yeah.
Because you know what? Yes, are you going to find a paper VFR sectional in the real world? Maybe, maybe not. But if you can do it once at that foundational level, you can always fall back onto it.
Yeah.
Are you going to do that in the real world? IFR to VFR to no,
Yeah,
probably
probably
not.
not.
But at least you know how to do it. It's not uncomfortable. That first time is not in a gray aircraft. Like, oh God, how do I do this?
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
oh wow, okay.
So, and then after that, they move on to what we call the mission FAM phase.
Okay.
And in that, they would practice formation, aerial refueling tracks. So we would practice aerial refueling, and there's something else in there, I believe. But
Okay.
yeah.
Great instrument player, though. I'm guessing it's a really capable instrument
yeah.
platform. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does
And,
it fly in the flare? Is it real good, easy to land, real intuitive there? It's a biz jet. So.
It's not the best. So instead of having ailerons, they have spoilerons. It's just a little, literally like a 2-inch strip, right? So when you turn the yoke, it deploys the spoileron that spoils the lift on that wing, and so that wing drops. And
Okay.
that's what affects your turn, right? So it wasn't, for a business jet, it's great, right? But it's not a very responsive aircraft as far as handling is concerned, right?
Okay.
But it's meant to be coupled up on autopilot and just cruising all the time. So, yeah,
Yeah, so it's a commercial airplane. It's a Beechjet 400, right?
it is.
That we
yes.
bought, or the Air Force, I should say, bought to do a pilot training mission. It wasn't designed for a pilot training
That's
mission.
right. No, it was not.
Good and bad to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any memorable flights in the T1? Any good cross countries you get to go anywhere
Oh,
fun?
man, there were so many. I can't remember them all. That thing was a cross-country machine. I loved it. Out of Oklahoma, we could get to Key West, I think, in one hop. Now, obviously, we got training involved, so we wouldn't do that. But, all over, man, it was great because in Oklahoma, obviously, you're in the middle of the U.S., so I got out to Seattle, Key West, like I previously mentioned, up to New York. Man, so I had a good buddy of mine who his parents lived in upstate New York, right? And we went in the fall, leaves are turning, and it was great. So we flew up to New York City in the T1 and did the Hudson tour.
Oh,
and
wow.
So
That's awesome.
we're low. I think it was 1,000 feet, right?
Oh, yeah.
Got the flaps out, and I distinctly recall some helicopter on the river going, "Is that a jet?"
long as you can comply with the altitudes and airspeeds, they'll let you do it.
Oh, yeah, man. Got the whole tour, man. Went all the way up the Hudson, all the way up to West Point, came off, and then landed in Syracuse.
Wow.
And so he just retired, so I can tell this story. All right, so we come off of that, and there's a low level through New York, and we call the controlling agency, and we're like, hey, man, we want to go on this route sometime on Saturday. And they were like, dude, you got it all weekend. Like, no one's going to be on that route. I'm like, great. So his parents live in this town, and I can't remember the name of it, but it is literally a turn point on the route. So we come in and we're just bombing through downtown, what downtown there is, right?
Yeah.
At 500 feet. And then his dad lived on the side of this mountain. And we just pull up into an orbit, and his parents come out, and you can see him in the front yards waving at us. And we take off and go land in Syracuse, and they came and picked us up and then drove us back to their place. But that was a really memorable moment.
I'm sure it was.
Really enjoyed it.
The chance to do stuff like that, and I don't know, some people maybe roll their eyes at air shows, and I whatever. The chance to let, as I'll jokingly say, the taxpayers see the machine, and then more importantly, see you, their family member, bring it to them, and you were getting good training out of it. I mean, clearly.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not fraud, waste, and abuse. Not even close. Like, there's good things happening for everyone, but then you get to. The reason I chose naval aviation was because of all the naval aviators I might sound strange with, I met in FBOs, made connections with, stayed in touch with. There's still folks I met before I joined the Navy that I still text with, one I was texting with tonight. Getting that out there so people can see it. So much of America doesn't see the military, doesn't get a chance to know someone who's an aviator or hear these stories or be part of this. So I think that stuff is so, number one, it's fun as heck, but also it's very valuable for the other side, for those folks to get to see that. I had a friend that was telling a story of an airplane. He remembers as a little kid, seeing a jet fly over the top of his house. And that was one of his first distinct memories of, hey, military aviation, what's that all about? Yeah. So very cool. Very cool. How long in the T1? How many years? Or how long was that set of orders?
So it was 3 years, but that was inclusive of PIT. So,
really?
So I think I got about 2.5 years or so as an instructor up at Vance.
Okay. Sounds about right. Where'd you go after that?
So I quit because I started flying before fiscal year 2002.
Okay.
I was under the 7-year commitment for props. Right?
Really? Wings plus 7.
So wings plus 7. So they changed it all to wings plus 8 in October of 2001.
Yes.
And since I was flying in September, I was under the old guidelines. So I was able to get out from my short tour.
Wow.
So I passed on the bonus. I was promoted, and then said, "Thank you very much. I'll see you later."
Okay. Where'd you go career-wise, though? Obviously, you had a plan before doing that.
Well, it was tentative. Yes. Okay. I knew it was going to happen, and I knew I was going to fly in the reserves somewhere. So I threw out my apps, and then.
What year was this again? I'm just trying to place it.
2011.
Okay, I'm trying to think where the market was and where things were. Okay.
Exactly. So it's kind of working its way back up, but airlines were not hiring. Okay. Let's just put it that way. So I ended up getting a job with this company called Avenge Inc. They were a subcontractor of Lockheed, and we were flying King Air 300s and 350s in Afghanistan, doing ISR.
No way. Yeah.
So,
contract ISR.
Yeah. So you do a couple months on, couple months off.
Okay.
And so
pretty good pay, right?
It wasn't, it wasn't the financial windfall you would expect, but for 6 months work, it was pretty decent, right?
And you're still flying a multi-engine turboprop, getting those hours, 100%. Staying current.
Yep. So flying a ton, we were always bumping up against the monthly max, right?
Wow.
So did that for a while, and then of course when I would come back for 2 months, I would just drill as much as I could with the reserve unit at 10.
Okay.
So
and I was going to say,
working full time.
You jumped ahead on that. Yeah. When did you get picked up by VT10? How'd you find out about VT10?
Oh yeah. So my wife's from Birmingham.
Okay.
And so I knew about VT10, but I didn't know anyone at VT10. So I put in an application. I just got on the Sinatra website and looked at the contact information for the OSO. So I gave him a call and asked him a bunch of questions, and he's like, dude, just put in your app. I said, okay. So I had a recommendation from my squadron commander, Air Force Colonel, and then another Air Force Colonel who was my wing commander. He's basically the Commodore equivalent, but kind of like the Commodore on steroids. He's got a little more responsibilities as an Air Force guy. But anyway, recommendations from those two, and got picked up. And I'll tell you what, man, I got out of the Navy, and I was unemployed for a couple months. And I was starting to sweat bullets because I hadn't had an offer from anyone. And within 48 hours, I got the job in the reserves and the job with the contract company.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's really cool.
Luck and timing, I'm telling you.
Yes.
Yep.
Story of your life, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But speaking of which, and again, I'm fast forwarding here a little bit, you went from a no time in the T6 guy, literally showed up as a brand new T6 IP in the FIT-U, to be the CO of the Squadron Augment Unit, the SOW.
That's right.
I mean, how often does that happen?
None that I've heard of.
Yeah, so pretty, and we'll get to that later, but
sure.
What like you said, you put your hat in the ring, you put your app in the ring, I guess.
Yep.
You can't know unless you ask.
That's right.
You never know who they need, who they're hiring, but it worked out, and it worked out in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, very cool. Okay, so still flying the King Air. Where you said in Afghanistan?
Yeah, so I was in Kandahar for a while, and then in Bagram for quite a bit too.
How did that flying compare to the P-3? I mean, obviously not hunting submarines over Kandahar, but and it's a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit less capable airplane, but
yes.
Was it a pretty natural fit since you'd done ISR and you kind of knew the mission set?
Yes, I would say so. As far as that mission was concerned, I had a really good idea of what I was doing.
Gotcha.
It also had a Collins box, which was exactly the same as the one in the T1.
Nice.
So I recall that a lot of folks weren't familiar with the VNAV function of the box or the aircraft, and I knew all of that. I mean, I instructed on it. So
perfect.
Was very comfortable with that.
So quick spin up syllabus in the U.S., and then you went out there and flew operation.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
For folks that are thinking about that world, flying contract ISR or flying a King Air and that kind of mission set, I know a couple. Any advice, any thoughts, just for someone that knows nothing about it other than it's a lot of money, 6 months, and then I have 6 months off, and I'm off in some part of the world that probably is not a tourist trap.
For me back in that time, having a security clearance was paramount, right? You wouldn't even get an interview. So the vast majority of us were all ex-military. There were a couple guys there that were strictly civilian. There were a few. A couple guys were furloughed NetJets. Actually, there were a lot of furloughed guys, furloughed American pilots too. So DHL pilots, all kinds of different backgrounds. But the vast majority of us already had our clearance, and we had the military background. And there were Navy guys, Air Force guys, Army guys, and the contract that we were under was under Army flight regulations. So I feel like I got a taste of everything, Navy, Air Force, and then Army.
You got to tell me about that. How different is that?
It's quite different. It's the one thing that I recall blowing my mind when I was reading through the regs were in the Army, the squadron CO determines the crew rest requirement. It's not a set thing like it is for us in the Air Force. So, and I don't even know if he could change it or she could change it on a per mission basis. They probably could.
But they leave that level, and a CO is oftentimes an 03.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like a lieutenant in the Navy,
or a major,
but a captain. Yeah, exactly. It's a lot. It's delegated down to a lot lower level.
Yes, in the Army it is, definitely.
Oh my.
Yep.
Okay. So was that kind of the folks actively overseeing you, but you're a civilian contractor, just doing the missions that are assigned, basically? You just operate under those rules or that framework?
That's right. So you just had to know the Army regs.
Okay.
But it was all basically contract, civilian, I guess you could say, run.
Gotcha.
And then, let's see, the mission, my first couple of rotations, or maybe just my first, was a Task Force Odin support. So it's irrelevant. Basically, you're just helping out the troops, right?
Okay.
And then every other tour after that was JSOC support. So it was always special ops
Okay.
Of some kind. So JSOC was kind of an all-encompassing umbrella, right? So it was all what would we refer to as Delta or SEALs
Sure.
or Special Forces Rangers, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're their eye in the sky,
So,
basically.
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
The vast majority of the missions were giving support to the folks on the ground during the raids.
Oh,
so,
wow. So
Yeah,
you're airborne overhead
you're
for it.
literally talking to them.
Jeez.
Yeah. So,
Are you in, and I'm going to use big air quotes here, the stack with their other aircraft, other assets involved?
Yeah, there could be other folks in the RAWs.
Okay.
Yeah, I can talk about that. Yeah. So
Don't have to if we can't, but
yeah, so
it's not just
a
you
lot of
alone and
times.
unafraid is what I'm getting
No,
at. There's a lot
no.
more to it.
So there's other people there, a lot of UAVs and F-16s,
Yeah.
all sorts of folks. Yeah.
Giant deconfliction
Yeah,
exercise.
depending on the mission.
Okay.
So,
You didn't fly with goggles at all, did you?
no, we
Okay.
did not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So day and night VFR. I'm wondering what is IFR like in a mountainous country with not great ATC?
Yeah, it can get pretty hairy. So
And you have a weather radar on the airplane, right?
we did.
Okay.
Yes.
But not terrain mapping, like.
Not quite.
Yeah.
No.
I'm only going to trust it so much.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
How long did you fly that contract?
So I did that for a couple years.
Okay.
And then I quit that job primarily because my first kid was coming.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
I
Okay.
did not want to be gone for 8 weeks with a
Yeah.
newborn at home.
Yep.
So I had the reserve job, and I knew that I could basically get by with just the reserves for a short amount of time.
Okay.
So I decided I wasn't going back, but fortunately, the hiring window for the airlines opened up, and I put in my apps and was very quickly hired by a major airline.
Gotcha.
So basically, no gap in income. It was great.
Very
Yeah.
fortunate for sure.
Yeah,
And then,
absolutely.
like you said, still doing the reserve thing, and you
100%.
I'm going to jokingly say here, you literally worked from I think the very first job you had at the SAL, was it public affairs, student control, ops, executive officer, all the way up to the CO. Literally, I don't want to say bottom to top, but you literally worked your way all the way through it.
Yeah.
How has VT10 changed over those couple of years? Because it's been a couple of years. Obviously, we train backseaters, we train NFOs. We have a small international contingent of, Germans, Norwegians, Saudis. Other countries train with us, but it's mostly U.S. folks going to fly in the back of a Hornet or going to fly E2, C2, E6, a big wing asset of some kind.
That's right.
I think I got them
P8s,
all.
yep.
P3, P8. Yeah, there you go. Can't miss the P8.
Yeah.
How has it changed over time? Because I only know the small snippet that I've seen so far, but you've seen so much more. I think that's really, really awesome.
Yeah. So the thing that I've noticed is that things are cyclical.
Okay.
So we've been through probably a handful of different syllabus revisions since I've been here. And it always shifts. So it's always a balance of adequate training, or thorough training rather, and what can we afford? It's always the budget.
Okay.
And what's the best allocation of resources, so we always seem to flip-flop between simulator intensive training and aircraft intensive training, right?
Okay. Where would you say we are right now on that pendulum?
So I'd say that balance has been somewhat steady. I'm talking like 60-40,
okay.
that kind of thing.
Okay.
It always shifts back and forth. The one thing I've noticed is that when I started, everyone did formation, right? We got away from that because, well, it's a great question. But now we're back into it, right?
Yeah,
Everybody
every
does
student.
formation
Yep.
again, right? And I think the latest reasoning was, well, we want to generate interest in people going to the strike community because apparently not as many were interested in going strike.
Okay.
So, yeah, I can kind of see that. that reasoning. But I'd say the basics are still there. They're still the same. It's always a cyclical thing between I guess it's just whoever has the bright idea fairy going on, right?
Yeah.
And
slash the money to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll see them get away from an idea, and then 5 or 6 or 7 years later, they come right back around to the same idea. And it's just, I've noticed it's just a revolving door of the same thing.
Okay, that's fair.
So
yeah. It's got to be hard because like none of us. Well, I say that, and then I'm talking to you. Not everyone stays in the organization for a large period of time, so not everyone gets to see that. I might only be here for shorter and shorter sets of orders, apparently, but a period of time, and then someone moves on. And so if you don't see that long-term trend, you wouldn't know. All you know is what your little snippet is, your little window into that.
Sure.
I don't know. I try to treat it as every single training event is so valuable. As silly as that sounds, like I had a couple of my awnings I just finished up today. For a while, we had bad weather.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you know what? I know we're not flying before I even roll out of bed, but we're going to have the best brief you've had in your life. I'm going to ask you every little thing I can, because if I can't work on this today, I'm going to work on that.
Yep.
But every snippet, they get so few. Every exposure is so valuable.
Yes.
And I hope people see it the same way. But they may not get across country because of scheduling or weather or whatever. So they may only see the local area here.
Yeah.
Does that prepare you for? I don't know. I don't think so, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to hold someone's training up as a result, but it's never going to be in a cheaper or simpler airplane than it is now.
Exactly.
I think.
Yeah.
So.
And that's my whole issue with going to a more simulator intensive training curriculum. I see what they're saying, and I see the justification, and sometimes I think it's a fine idea, and other times I just don't. There's only so much you can learn.
Yeah.
With the simulator, with the VR, but with the changing curriculum, they're saying that these students are soloing a lot faster. They're learning a lot more quickly. So maybe that does have something to say. But, and of course, you always want to avoid being that guy, the Luddite that's just like, back in my day, we should do it the way we've always done it, right? I hate hearing that. So it's...
There is a balance.
Yeah,
because you're right. You don't have to be all the way on that far side of it. It has to be my way. That's how I learned. Someone beat me, so I'm going to beat you. It doesn't have to be that. When people ask me, more flying or more sims, what's the answer? My answer is yes.
Yeah.
Not one or the other,
there you go.
But they complement one another.
Sure.
Do I need you slowly walking through it? Okay, I'm going to say slowly. Painfully slowly walking through a checklist in the airplane when you could have built those reps in the sim. That's where the sim is great. That procedural knowledge, we don't run sensors in the T6, but maybe that type of thing. Running a sensor emission systems, that's what that's good for. But guess what the sim doesn't have? Live comms.
Yeah.
Or that helmet fire. Your skin is not in the game at the same level.
Yeah, and that's my gripe. What I don't like seeing is a reduction of flight hours in the training syllabus.
Yes. Yes. Yep. At a minimum, more.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's the right way or the wrong way to think about it. The airplanes are never going to get any cheaper or simpler than a T6, most likely. So let's stick with what. Yeah, it's a different conversation for a different day. But I know there's very smart people that are thinking about that, and I hope they stay. I hope they get those folks, or not just folks that are stuck behind a desk, that they get to stay flying and they get to see just how quickly stuff can go sideways.
Yeah.
My favorite one is like a very first flight, right? Fan flight or whatever. And I'm like, hey man, you're going to make this mistake. You're going to get us airborne. You're going to check in with departure, and you guys always want to do an ops check. And in the sim, it's just you and the contract instructor. There's no one else talking. I promise you're going to talk over approach. Okay, sir, y'all be quiet. I'll listen up for that. Just every single time, going, and then they miss a call from approach. I'm like, I know the mistake you're going to make because there's limitations to how the sim works. It's the way it is. So I can see it. I can tell you, and you'll still make the mistake. You have to make the mistake in real life, I think, to learn it.
I think so.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. But one thing, you train folks in the T1, you train pilots. In the T6, you train NFOs, you train backseaters. Can you tell me about the differences? Obviously, two different services, but two different mindsets maybe, or is it actually the same?
Yeah, I'd say the mindset is probably the same. What you're trying to do as an instructor are different. Obviously, when you're training pilots, they're at the controls, so they can very easily kill you, right? In navigator training, you can very easily kill yourself because you're just the student takes so much of your essay from you, and it's really easy to let the aircraft get ahead of you, which is what we never want, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I always jokingly say I'm going to give you enough rope, but not enough to hang both of us.
That's right.
Yeah, because you're right. I didn't. That was something that I thought, especially coming here. I knew nothing about VT10 other than a friend told me this is where you want to go, and he was right.
Yep.
But I remember thinking, like, how hard could it be? I'm doing all the flying. You're using, 30, 40% brainstem power just making the physical inputs, but now you have to let them make decisions, give them enough, rope to, I don't know, maybe be terrible on a point-to-point, but not get a flight violation, still stay safe.
Yep.
Not literally not have something safety of flight occur. You can lose your situational awareness so quickly. And I wouldn't think so, because I'm like, hey, man, I signed for the bird. I'm doing all the flying. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus, I think when you're flying with it, and again, I've not flown with student pilots, but take the controls. In fact, that's your job, and you can kind of maybe have a little bit more situational awareness. Is that a fair statement?
Much more situational awareness, yes.
Okay.
Because the student, you can see them getting scope locked, right? But you are able to stand back and kind of watch it all happen. You're like, oh, okay, maybe I need to intervene now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you, additionally, so here is another level to it. When you are downstairs in the FIT-U, you're training other instructor pilots to be instructor pilots in the T6.
Yes.
How is that? I mean, is that something that was, again, a natural fit because you'd done it in the T1? It's just a different airplane now, basically?
I think so. I think I was a lot more comfortable doing it because I had done pilot training. So as far as, what to look for during critical phases of flight, when to intervene and all that, that wasn't so much an issue. But the other thing is in the T1, I'm training them to be pilots, right? Here, I'm training instructors to be instructors.
Yeah.
So,
that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a totally different mindset. So when they first get started in the FIT-U, you go through the FAM phase or the NATOS phase, right? And so, that's just like teaching a pilot. You're just like, hey, this is how we fly this airplane. These are the procedures and this and that. But then once you get into the instructor phase, that's when you have to teach them to be you.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yep.
Yeah.
Common errors. What about, I'm a helicopter guy who's never flown with an NFO, so yes, I know what it's like to fly with a crew, obviously. Yeah. But what are things that you would see folks come downstairs to FIT-U that, I don't know, maybe you can preemptively, if you have this bit of knowledge, you can maybe kind of work on and be better? Any thoughts, anything kind of, it's a broad question, but.
Yeah, you mean as far as being better instructor pilots?
Yeah, absolutely. Always striving to be better, even just because I'm fully qualified on 2 mission sets not fully qualified, but just because I'm qualified on 2 mission sets, I'm always still trying to figure out what's next, how to be better. And the beauty of a crew aircraft is I could fly with other pilots and I can observe them. I'm up on ICS listening silently from the back. I can't do that in the T6. It's me and a student or me and another instructor, but that's it unless I talk to other folks about it.
Yeah. So the thing with instructors teaching them how to fly with student navigators, when it comes to the earlier phases of training, contacts and instruments and even visual navigation, the thing that I try to get them to get across to the student is that it is a very regimented step-by-step procedure, right? And so, kind of like when they go through instruments and they're going through their turn point procedures, right? It's very regimented. It's just one step after the other, after the other, after the other. And so keeping the student on track is paramount, in my opinion. So now when you get to more advanced training, when you get into the formation phase of training, it's a little bit different. So basically you're flying all the formation yourself, right?
Correct.
But it's instilling in the student to keep being one step ahead. And of course, we teach that throughout the training curriculum, right? Regardless of what phase they're in, but it's imperative at that point that you not let them stray very far from the path at all.
Yeah.
That they always have to be ahead. And there's a tendency to gloss over things that you can't afford to do. You can't just say, oh, well, we're gonna do this approach, and then we'll do this approach, and then we'll do a departure and re-enter for the overhead. You're like, yeah, well, that's great, but there's a lot of intermediate steps that you're not addressing that once we get in the airplane, you're not going to be able to address it because you're going to be clueless. Things are happening way too fast, right?
Yep.
It just depends on what phase they're teaching and what I try to get them to emphasize.
But chair flying, being able to visually understand what you expect before you even get in the airplane.
Yes, and a lot of it is just trying to get the point across that there are a lot more details that are extremely important than you may think.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. We mentioned, obviously, going back and forth between military and civilian flying. You said the Airbus A3, is it 320? 320. Obviously flying totally different mission set on the airline side, but you're doing that and you're still flying as a reservist in the Navy.
Yes.
Is it a challenge to split the time between the two and always keep that balance?
It was.
Oh, by the way, and family, let's not forget that's that third chunk, probably the most important chunk of all.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So I'd say with my airline career, I feel like I've kind of gone backwards a bit, because when I first got hired, I flew the 767 and the 757 international, and then moved up to the 787. So I flew that for a hot minute. And then, of course, COVID hit, right? So then I got displaced and I went to the Airbus.
Okay.
So
still awesome airplanes in all cases.
They are, I've been a bit of a Boeing snob my airline career, but I knew that I'd rather fly the 320 than the 73.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Really?
Not
I don't
that
actually
there's
know
anything wrong
Well, I was
with
going to ask,
the 73.
what's the difference between the two then from that perspective?
So, in broad terms, I think in the 7.3, it's quite a bit louder up front in the cockpit.
Really?
A lot of engine noise.
Okay.
So it's not as comfortable. It's cramped. There's not much space, particularly if you got somebody in the jump seat.
Okay.
On the Airbus, it's a lot quieter. It's a lot roomier, and you have a tray. So they can be out at all times. So I like that.
Gotcha. Is it? And this is a silly question. Is it a yoke?
No, it's a side stick.
Side stick.
Yeah.
What is it? T1 was a yoke, right?
T1 was a yoke.
T6 is a center stick.
It is.
But now a side stick. Was that an intuitive thing to learn?
No.
I don't think it would be. Yeah.
It takes some getting accustomed to, because typically when you're flying with a yoke or a stick, center stick, like in the T6, you're holding in an input, right? So with the side stick on the bus, you just put in a control input, and once the aircraft, let's just say you want to take a left turn, right? You bring the stick to the left, and then once you get the angle of bank you want, you neutralize the stick. So you center it, right?
Okay.
So the stick's centered, but you're turning at 30 degrees angle of bank, which is counterintuitive, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So the only time you move the stick around is when you want an input done, but you don't hold that input. You always neutralize the stick.
Okay.
So the one time that it really got my attention was coming in for a crosswind landing, right? So in the airlines, typically what we do is we just hold it in a crab all the way down, and then when you get to the flare, you kick out the crab, you bring the wing down, right? So just like in T6, right?
Yep.
Wing down, top rudder.
Top rudder, yep.
In the bus, when you kick out the rudder, you don't put wing down because you're commanding an input, right? So what they tell you is when the wing comes up, you just knock it down with the stick. You just keep it from rising.
Okay.
So if you do put in stick with top rudder, it's going to dip the wing, and it will scare you.
I'm guessing you know that through experience. Yes.
I do, yes.
Wow. Okay.
So,
man, and then going back between that, which is a very technically complex airplane, I would imagine, and the T6, which is reversible flight control. I mean, it's a complex airplane, don't get me wrong, but I wonder if there's like negative learning habits that can go from one to the other, or you've got so much. I mean, you had 1,600 hours in the T6 when you finished up. That's a lot of experience. So you probably are very, I'm in a T6 today as opposed to I'm in the Airbus today.
Sure.
No question in your mind of what you need to do.
No,
Okay.
not really. So they're definitely different flight characteristics, right? I mean, just different sight pictures coming in for the flare, obviously. Yeah.
And you mentioned you started out doing international flying.
I did.
Okay. Was it a lot of travel, I'm guessing? I mean, it's a lot of travel in either case, but flying internationally versus flying domestically, kind of what are just broad strokes things that people should think about? Because I know nothing about either. I know what people tell me, but that's about it.
So international flying, particularly when you're doing wide body flying, you take a long trip down, you spend the night, probably 24 hours, 30 hours, something like that, and then one long flight back, right? I enjoy that kind of living.
Okay.
On the bus, it's a bunch of flights every day for 2, 3, 4, 5 days at a time, right?
Yeah.
And
very different.
Yeah, it's very different. So I feel like the company ruined me by sending me straight to international long haul flying.
Got you hooked.
And then, got me hooked on the easy life, and then brought me back to domestic flying where you're doing multiple legs a day, and it's just, it's not bad, but it could be better.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, speaking of it's not bad, but it could be better. So I think we're finally crawling out of all this the COVID stuff and a lot of the restrictions. Thankfully, all that's, kind of getting a lot better.
Yeah.
From the perspective up front, is the industry, I often tell the story. I remember right when COVID happened, I lived by Norfolk International Airport. And I remember running at night, and I pulled an earbud out, and I couldn't hear anything. It was deathly quiet. There were no APUs. There were no engines. That airport was silent. And I was a little kid at 9/11, but I remember when the skies were quiet back then. Those were kind of two big moments. The industry has come back. We stopped parking airplanes. I think there's a lot of people still flying now, or just kind of getting back into it. So we're headed in the right direction. But from your perspective, from your seat, so to speak, are things getting better? Are things kind of returning back to that normal, hopefully pre-COVID normal of airline travel?
100%. I'd say on the domestic side, just flying around the U.S., we're, I want to say within 10%, maybe less, of where we were pre-pandemic.
That's great.
Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's where we are. Now, international flying is obviously still depressed, but I think once we get a handle on that, that's also going to take off again.
Okay.
And
so to speak.
So to speak. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think a lot of people have, missed traveling. Yeah. And they're waiting to get back to it. And as soon as they're able to, I think it's going to be a rocket ride to the top, man.
Cool.
So
and that's only going to be good things for the airline industry, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is probably what everyone wants to get back. Like you said, get back out there and go to fun, exciting places.
Yeah.
Not the couch. So
yeah.
Back to VT10, one more big time here. So we talked about moving up slowly through the SAL. Was it just a natural thing? Like, hey, this is a job. Yep, as you're spending more time at the squadron, you're getting more quals, getting more hours. You just became the guy that kind of worked through it. I don't know anything about how that process works, is why I'm asking.
Yeah, so, I'm trying to think of how I can explain this without it getting too boring, because it's oddly specific to our reserve Navy. But basically, those billets that we occupy are lieutenant billets.
Okay.
And there's a couple of O5 billets, and it's specifically for the CO and potentially an XO, right? So you can be +1 or -1 in grade, but once you're +2, you've got to have a waiver, right?
Okay.
So, and those waivers can be given or taken at any point, right? So there was a time where guys and girls were in the unit and they couldn't get to 20 years because they had to depart.
Okay.
And so when you depart, you're not going to another flying billet because you're too senior to be flying for anyone else, right? These are, you get into, in the Navy reserves, you get into those jobs through selection boards. And if you're not junior qualified, you're not getting picked up, right? So yeah, there was a natural progression, and I'd be lying if I didn't say that part of choosing that job was to ensure that I could get to 20 years.
Of course. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sure. So, yeah, and I felt that, going for that job, that someone needs to do it, right? So I felt like it had to be someone from within the unit who knew the unit and cared about the people in the unit.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, those are my driving forces.
Sure. And you're not just leading other aviators. I mean, you are, but a lot of the other reservists are, airline pilots like you, folks that don't necessarily live here in Pensacola. They've got other parts of those other 2/3, right? The family and the job.
Yes.
And then the other third of their life is here as a reservist. Is that a tough challenge? I mean, keeping everyone focused, doing things right, doing things safely, maintaining the standards, and people have such a broad background. How? I mean, I feel like that's got to be incredibly challenging. But
it can be. For the most part, we're all 04s,
yeah,
05s.
Yeah.
So we've been around the block. We know what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
But it is challenging, and yeah, it's you're not having to beat people about the head and shoulders to get them to do the job properly, but you are there to assist them, because it's not an easy task.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Makes sense. Not their friend, you're the boss, but by the same token, it is maybe a little bit more of a friendship, a little bit more of a kindred soul.
It is, yeah, especially because these are folks that you've been working with for 10 years. I mean, they're good friends.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Well, obviously, gosh, how long has it been? A couple weeks now since your change of command?
Yeah. So, man, it's almost been a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes by quickly. So congratulations again on that. Probably I know it's definitely a very big day. Awesome day at the museum.
Yeah.
Handed the flag off to the next generation there. I always like to ask, what's next for you? Obviously, still flying the Airbus.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, going to move out to domicile, right?
Okay.
And then take the captain upgrade.
Heck yeah.
So I could do that now, but I'd rather be there and just have to drive to the airport. It makes it a lot easier.
Sure. Well, that's something that a lot of folks that aren't airline people, and I did not realize until I talked to some of my airline buddies, you can have great seniority in the right seat, but then when you move over to the left seat as a captain, you're all the way at the back.
Starting all over again.
Yep. So
Absolutely.
there's pay differences, but the seniority and scheduling and being able to build your plan, your schedule for the month, that's what really makes a big difference to quality of life.
It is. And when you're senior, you're able to take advantage of what we call premium pay.
Okay.
So you get paid overtime, essentially.
Some
to
flights
do the same
pay more than others?
trip. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and typically those are trips that can't get covered, right? So
okay.
they're like, hey, we'll pay you a little bit more to take care of this for us, right?
Yeah.
So when you're senior, you can take advantage of that. So if you're a real senior pilot in the right seat, potentially you can make as much or more than a guy in the left seat.
Wow.
Just based off of your seniority,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and you work a lot less to get the same amount of pay.
Yeah.
So,
Things to think about.
yeah. So in the airline, seniority is king, 100%.
I like to end these with a couple kind of broad questions.
Sure.
If you could do it over again, and it is a big air quote, and we can even talk about naval aviation, the airline world, all that, civilian flying as well. Looking back with kind of the benefit of time, and I say looking back, it's not like you're done. You still have an incredible career to go. But I often look back at my life and some of the decisions I've made, and some things I'd absolutely do the same thing over again, and other things I'm like, oh yeah, I wish I had some experience and knowledge. And I know I would definitely do or say things differently. Anything broadly speaking for folks that are thinking about naval aviation, I don't know, want to be successful, just from your life and your experiences, anything you think you would have done differently, or glad you went exactly where you went and did exactly what you did all the way to now?
Well, if I could do it all over again, for me specifically, I wouldn't change a thing.
Okay.
I feel that for me, things have worked out as well or better than I could have anticipated. Now, if I were just speaking in generalities, I would say having prior flight experience before going to naval aviation training, would have been immensely helpful. That I would probably do.
Okay.
In general. But for me, my career has been fabulous. I mean, I can't tell you how many times luck and timing have worked out for me. That more than I feel like it should have. So,
and perseverance too. Like when stuff is not always perfect, you don't just give up.
That's right.
It's easy to say that. It's hard to do it.
It is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh, this even sounds cheesy to ask, but as an aviator, who inspires you? Are there people that you can think of that, I don't know, historical figures? I mean, your dad obviously is an aviator that you know really well, but are there people you can kind of look to and take lessons from and say, hey, I don't know, I look at it two ways. That's who I want to be. That's who I don't want to be. Yeah. Not always the same person. Sometimes the same person. Anything like that you kind of look to or that you kind of keep in the back of your mind?
I wouldn't say there's anyone specific, but I think that when it comes to being a pilot, there's always your piloting skills and your acuity. That's one thing, but there's also your personality and your social interaction. That also goes a long way, I think. And particularly in the airline world, you can be Chuck Yeager, right? But if you're a jerk, I don't want to sit next to you for 4, maybe 5 days. Oh my God. So, I think those two go hand in hand, and it's not just in the airlines. It's a lot of things in the military too. Back to our conversation about being a good instructor, right? There's a lot of knowledge of personality and learning techniques, right? And teaching techniques. Mastering all those things are what make you an effective instructor, in my opinion.
You're always constantly working at it.
Yeah, constantly working.
You didn't just turn a light switch on one day and
no
become the aviator you are today.
Exactly. And the one thing that I really enjoy about flying is that you never have the perfect flight, right? So, but you always have a better flight than the last flight, right? And the thing that I really enjoy about our profession is that I'm constantly honing those skills, and I'm never going to be perfect, but I'm always working my way towards perfection, and I enjoy that challenge.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Being cognizant of it, being conscious in your brain. I think there's so many folks that just kind of go through life and life happens to them.
Yeah.
But you're describing a mindset of, nope. I fell down on this today. I don't want to try to put words in your mouth, but I know for me, I like it when people call me out. I'm a BS when I mess something up because then I know, I'm never going to do that again. Number one, I don't want to hear about it again.
Yeah.
But number two, okay, capture that learning point. I'm going to move forward. And I like knowing when I'm wrong because I'm wrong all the time, clearly.
Yeah.
But I like to know about it because that's how you shorten that feedback loop. And I think a lot of times people confuse intelligence with experience. There are plenty of people that, if you've done the thing a bunch of times, you will eventually become experienced, and that experience can then appear as intelligence. And a lot of times I've had friends that have maybe emulated people that they shouldn't have because they kind of got caught up between the two. Yeah. But like you talk about just being a good person and then always trying to work harder to be better. I think it's hopefully universal themes, but awesome. What I always like to give you kind of the final word, the person I'm talking to, but anything I should have asked you or any kind of final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I think we've covered it all, man.
Awesome.
I think if I had advice for anyone that wants to walk this path, I'd say in general, I believe that we are more of a driving force than we think we are in what happens to us and what we do in our lives. And I guess that doesn't really necessarily apply to just aviation, just to life in general. And honestly, I don't know why I feel like I need to impart that knowledge right now, but
I like it. No. But be conscious of it.
Yeah.
Be cognizant of it. You're absolutely right.
Back to the persistence thing. When it comes to military training, it's not easy. It's extremely difficult, and it's not that what we need to learn is rocket science or anything like that, but that the compressed timeline that we have to learn all this, to master it, is you got to have a real steep learning curve. And there isn't time to wallow over failures. You just got to brush yourself off and move on to the next thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
And your career is a perfect example of keeping on, and
Yeah.
look at the great success. Truly, that's.
I think all of our careers are. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I definitely want to highlight yours too, because I'll be honest, I know folks that have had big setbacks professionally and could not mentally come back from them. Truly, quick story time for
Sure.
me. I blew, I'm sure you know what a CAD is, cartridge actuated device. I blew a CAD on my aircraft commander check ride. Yeah, it ended very shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
We didn't even get airborne. I think the aircraft commander, he's about to be the skipper at HM-14 now, our sister squadron. He said he felt very bad about it, but he's like, that was probably the shortest check ride I've ever given. I'm like, Red, yes, it's the shortest check ride I've ever taken. And I remember for about 2 or 3 days, I was just like, what am I doing? I moved a switch the wrong way. I made a mistake, 100% take ownership for it. But bouncing back from it, it's not easy. You need to work with others. Like we always tell students, cooperate to graduate, work with others. Sometimes you need to learn from more senior, more experienced folks. Not everyone is perfect. I might look at someone like you without knowing some of the stuff we talked about tonight and think, man, his career was entirely blessed and everything worked out perfectly. And I think it was, right? But you also came back from adversity at times because you chose to. You actively chose to keep fighting. You didn't just say, well, I'm done. I'm going to go be a French teacher, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You chose not to. And it is a choice.
Yeah.
So I hope other people make that choice too.
Me too.
Cool. Short round. Thank you again so very much.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.